Hello curious people, today I am here to help you. I know you are using this video to help you fall asleep. So before you like this video and subscribe to the channel, tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Make yourself comfortable now. I stepped into the stories. I leaned my head back against the wall in the emergency room at our local hospital, tears pouring down my face. And it wasn't just from the pain either. The swelling and rash had already gone down after several antihistamine and other anti-allergen shots, but my heart was breaking for my poor darling Kara. I didn't mean to. I can't believe I killed the most precious thing to me in the world. I looked at myself in the selfie view of my phone camera. I still looked deadly ill. The police had questioned me, but there was nothing more than a squashed bloody spider in my bedroom, and they had to let me go. They said they would search for Kara as they helped the paramedics get me out of there. I heard them talking about mental breakdown and paranoid with the emergency intake. That day had been like most other days I spent with Kara. We were in bed, and it was her turn. I slipped my fingers over her dazzling silken skin, feeling her soft and lovable under my hands. And then, I tried to repress the familiar shudder as her limbs elongated and she sprouted 4 more. Bristles poked out of her smooth skin, her head grew large and her eyes multiplied. I rolled away from her. A spider as big as a beach ball stood quivering on the bed where Kara had been buckling and crying out in pleasure a second ago. The transformation was very fast. And it only lasted a few minutes, mercifully. I tried to control my face and body so she couldn't see my fear, which had never lessened, not one iota, through all these months. I hated and feared spiders since childhood, but that had never come up in the very early days of our relationship. About 3 weeks into what had been the best relationship of my life so far, Kara decided she trusted me and told me the reason why she hadn't let me make her orgasm. "I turn into a spider," she had murmured. I froze. I knew immediately she wasn't joking or mad, simply telling the bald truth. No one else knows. I've never orgasmed with a partner before. She snuggled up to me. There was a mirror next to my bed when I was a child. I was, experimenting, and then it happened. I could see the spider in the mirror. I couldn't say anything. She looked up at me, worry shadowing her beautiful green eyes. "You don't mind, do you? It doesn't change anything. I love you so much. I've never told anyone. I want to be with you properly, let you do all the things to me." She pressed against me, naked, and my heart had melted even as I became aroused. I drew her close and whispered, "Baby, it's okay. I would love you even if you turned into a worm, remember?" She cried and then opened up to me. I reached deep inside her, and soon enough, she orgasmed. That had been 6 months ago. I always let go of her as soon as she started transforming, so I wouldn't have to feel her body shrinking and ballooning, the limbs growing and the bristles. Oh, the bristles. I couldn't get used to it. I walked to the bedroom window. It was getting worse. Because now Kara's love had grown, she wanted me to hold her while she came, to pet her while she was in spider form. She wanted more. She never said so, but I knew, by the look of reproach and longing on her beautiful face as she flickered back into human form. And she had been talking about marriage and commitment. She was only a spider for a few minutes. And everything else was perfect. A movement caught my eye. I turned. She was scuttling towards me. She had never done that before. Wordlessly understanding my aversion, she had always respected my distance while she was a spider. But now she was approaching. I took a step back, impulsively reached down, grabbed my slipper and raised it. The large spider jumped on me and then bit, releasing venom into my blood. I screamed in agony and then I lashed out with the slipper. The pain and horror befuddling me, the slipper squashed my beloved Kara fully. I fell howling to the floor in a paroxysm of grief and pain. I will never love again. Fuck HIPAA, my new patient can literally talk me into anything and I have concerns. On August 12, 2017, the Las Vegas Police Department conducted a sweep of a homeless encampment. Shortly after the sweep commenced, an intoxicated youth stumbled over and told the officers to go back to the substation. The officers obeyed these instructions. Upon return to their substation, they were asked to explain their actions. When they were unable to provide a satisfactory explanation, they were once again sent out to complete the sweep. Approximately 10 minutes after they arrived, the youth once again approached the officers. This time, he told them to go to a location approximately 40 minutes away from the encampment. Once again, the officers willingly obeyed the youth's instructions. By the time the officers returned to the encampment, most of the inhabitants had taken the opportunity to gather their belongings and scatter. 2 weeks later, dispatch received an emergency call about an unresponsive teenager. EMS arrived and revived him. Upon returning to consciousness, the youth sat up. When asked, he introduced himself as Mikey. When the responders attempted to take him to the hospital, the youth refused and told them to go across the street. The first EMT obeyed. The second EMT, who was and remains partially deaf, did not. In the subsequent incident report, the EMT describes feeling the compulsion to obey the youth's instructions, but his concern for the young man overrode this compulsion and he continued to provide care. With extreme difficulty, the EMT loaded him into the ambulance. The youth became combative and injured the EMT, who called law enforcement for assistance. Nearby units responded. When officers arrived, the youth continued to fight but weakened quickly due to exertion and eventually began to fade out. Officers were able to take him into custody. Shortly after his arrest, officers discovered the youth had an outstanding warrant for drug distribution and he was transported to jail. Due to the youth's mother having a long history with the agency, personnel were monitoring his movements. As a result, the organization was quickly notified of his arrest. Personnel were immediately dispatched to post bail and bring the youth into agency custody. Upon arrival at AHH NASCU, the youth voluntarily submitted to a paternity test, the results of which indicated that the director of the Agency of Helping Hands is his father. Under these unusual circumstances, the youth was selectively debriefed and enrolled in training to develop employability as a field agent for AHH. It is fair to say that Michael's training has had mixed results. When Michael is motivated and sober, he is an asset. Unfortunately, recovery remains a significant obstacle for Michael and his periods of sobriety have become less frequent over the years. At this time he poses a liability while in the field, and is therefore assigned to AHH NASCU as peer support to other inmates who have demonstrated cooperative traits. It should be noted that Michael's mother is currently incarcerated in Ward 1. She is not cooperative. Michael has stated he is not close with his mother, an assertion that is supported by his behavior. Michael does not foster relationships with his half-siblings Raphael, Charles, and Gabriella, all of whom are employed in various capacities at the agency. Michael is close to T-Class agent Christoph W. While closeness between T-Class personnel is generally encouraged, this friendship unfortunately led Michael to make poor decisions that resulted in his reclassification from A-Class to T-Class. While a reversion remains possible, it is not likely to occur until Michael satisfactorily overcomes his current struggles. Michael W. is a 26-year-old male with black hair and brown eyes. He is 5 feet 7 inches tall and clinically underweight. His diagnoses include post-traumatic stress disorder, general anxiety disorder, attention deficit disorder, major depressive disorder, alcohol use disorder, and avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Michael was diagnosed with conduct disorder as a minor, but does not currently exhibit traits associated with either conduct disorder or antisocial personality disorder. He is currently participating in a treatment program administered by Dr. Wingeride. For additional context on inmates mentioned in Michael's interview, please see the files for Inmate 20, Ward 1, the narc, and inmate 26, Ward 1, the Big Bad Wolf. It should be noted that Michael was heavily intoxicated during his interview but insisted on scheduling it for today. He also insisted that the interviewer's assistant, T-Class Agent Christoph W., not attend. Interview subject, the siren. Classification string, cooperative/destructible/gayan/constant/low/demon. Interviewer, Rochelle B. Interview date, December 25, 2024. When I was 4 years old, my mom realized that I could make anyone except her do whatever I wanted. That scared her to death, so she basically programmed me to not do it. I was so afraid of her it never occurred to me to deprogram myself. When I was 8 years old, I walked in on my mother skinning a man alive. That scared me to death, but because she was immune to my instructions, that's what we used to call it, my instructions, I couldn't program her to stop doing it. Even before all that, we didn't get along. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't hers. We were too different. She was a good kid who grew into a good grown-up. I, on the other hand, was a bad kid. Everyone said so. Mom, my uncle, teachers. Everyone but my aunt, for as long as I can remember. Mikey, why are you such a bad kid? I didn't know. My mom says I was getting into fights before I could walk. Learning to walk just made me a better fighter. I fought with neighbors, classmates, and cousins. I probably would have fought my mom too if I hadn't been terrified of her. She wasn't a bad mom. She really wasn't. She was just a product, not of her environment, the opposite, actually, but of her own fear and trauma. Her trauma made her excel at everything. She was beyond reproach in every way in everything she did. She was 10 times better than everyone else at everything. She had to be to get a tenth of what everyone else got. She wanted me to be like her. The problem was, I'm not. I'm her opposite. Her nightmare come true. Her personal front row seat to the consequences of nonconformity. It started early. Really early, like, in kindergarten. I was a bad kid. So were half the students in that class. No one ever cared when those kids were assholes, though. Grown-ups only cared when I was an asshole. Here's an example for you. One morning before recess, this kid stole my Batman coat. I pushed him. I got in trouble for attacking him. He didn't get in trouble for stealing my coat. So the next day, I stole his coat. He pushed me. He didn't get trouble, but I got sent to the principal for stealing and starting fights. That's how it went every single time. There were times I didn't even do anything and still got in trouble. All it took was an accusation and I was screwed. I don't know what you call the opposite of the benefit of the doubt, but that's all I ever got. So I got in a lot of trouble in a very short amount of time. Detentions were just the start. Yeah, detentions in kindergarten. I know, right? Anyway, suspensions followed that, then expulsions. I got expelled for the first time in first grade. First day, in the first grade, now that song's going to be stuck in my head for a week. God damn it. I'm not saying I didn't deserve the discipline. I already told you I was a bad kid. I probably did deserve it. But my point is this. If I deserved it, 10 other kids in that class deserved it too. But I was the only one who got punished. I noticed, too. And when I asked the kindergartners' version of, "Hey, what the hell, guys," everyone just told me I was expected to do better because I knew better. One time Mom said, "I don't know why you're a bad kid, Mikey, but I know you know better. I need you to start acting like it right now." It's like, she and everyone else assumed the worst of me while expecting the best of me. Nothing I did was right. Nothing I tried was good enough. It would never be good enough, because everyone around me had already decided that I was a bad kid. When nothing you do is good enough, you either break down or give up. At the ripe old age of 8, I gave up and decided to be what everyone had already decided I was. And that, in short, is the story of my life. It's the story of my mom's life too. Everyone also assumed the worst of her while expecting the best. But where I revolted, she complied. That's how she ended up excelling in school and the military and as a cop and at life in general. In other words, she excelled because she followed their rules. She had to follow them 10 times better than anyone else while accomplishing 10 times more 10 times faster than anyone she worked with. But she did it. And she wanted me to do it too. It's not her fault. Mom was a freak for rules because she grew up seeing what happens to people don't follow them. She lost her mom and her uncle. Almost lost her brother, too. She didn't want to lose anyone else, and she didn't want anyone to lose her. She really thought that following the rules 10 times better made her one of them. She really thought she was on their team and she really thought they were on hers. That changed in 2nd grade. Second day, in the 2nd grade, shit, man. It was my uncle's birthday party, and it was getting pretty late, which means everyone was getting kind of combative. My aunt started a fight with my mom. My aunt was always starting shit with mom. She and I were a lot alike. It's probably why mom came down on me so hard. Anyway, the neighbors down the street called the cops on us. When the cops came, mom complied immediately. On the ground, hands up. She pulled me down with her. My uncle followed her lead. He was so drunk he face-planted and kind of just wriggled while everyone else got down on the ground like mom. She was young, but she was already the matriarch. We all did what she said. Except my aunt. She staggered past us. Her feet came within 2 inches of my face. I wonder if things would have turned out better if she'd stepped on me and tripped. If she face-planted too and couldn't get up again, just like my uncle. She didn't. She just kept not following their orders. So they shot her. She fell down next to me, choking on her own blood while my mom screamed. My world shattered. My mom was a cop. Cops were the good guys. Good guys don't kill people. So why did the cops kill my aunt? Did that mean cops weren't good guys? And did that mean my mom was a bad guy? Later, mom told me my aunt got shot because she was being bad. I know she was trying to comfort me. But it just scared the shit out of me. That's because everyone, including my mom, told me all the time that I was bad. And between the stress, the grief, the terror, and weird little kid logic, I interpreted her words to mean that good guys are supposed to shoot the bad guys. So of course, that meant the good guys were supposed to shoot me. I had nightmares for weeks, the kind where you wake up sweaty on the verge of wetting yourself. I had nightmares about my aunt drowning in her own blood, and nightmares about my mom putting on her police uniform and chasing me through the house until she caught me. Then she'd tell me I was bad and shoot me. That's what she always said in the nightmare: I have to shoot you, Mikey, because I'm a good guy and you're bad. That was unfair, considering she quit the department after what happened to my aunt. Never even went back to work. But I didn't make that connection. The only connection I made was my aunt got shot because she was bad. People get shot when they're bad. I was bad, which meant I was going to get shot. The nightmares only ended when my aunt came back to life. But I'll get to that in a minute. Everyone in the family changed after that, but no one changed as much as my mom. She quit her job. She burned her uniform in the fire pit out back. She made the department track her down in person to take back her badge and service weapon. She stopped inviting her friends over, because all her friends were cops. She stopped telling me that I knew better. She stopped telling me I had to follow the rules. She stopped telling me I was bad. She stopped doing a lot of things. And she started doing others. Like skinning people alive. So, I knew what blood smelled like. I got into enough fights to have tasted and smelled both my own blood and other people's blood to recognize it instantly. I hate the smell. It reminds me of how scared I used to get when I bled. It reminds me of the shame that came when I made someone else bleed. And it reminds me of the satisfaction I got whenever I made someone else bleed. Anyway, the point is I started smelling blood in the house. For some reason, I went looking for it. I'm not completely sure why. I think I kind of hoped my mom was fighting someone, just like I did at school. That she was being bad, too. Making someone else bleed. I thought if I could catch her at it, catch her fighting, catch her inflicting pain, catch her being bad just like me, then I wouldn't be so scared of her anymore. Except I was never going to catch her, because the blood smell always came from the basement. The basement was always locked. Mom kept it locked way before I started smelling blood. The basement was dangerous. Moldy, soggy, full of sharp, rusty shit, and probably haunted because the house had once been a mortuary. That's what she told me. The basement used to be full of dead people 7 days a week. Some of them are probably still here. Enter at your own risk. I wasn't scared of fights, but I was scared of monsters, and I was definitely scared of ghosts. I was so scared I had a full-on meltdown when my uncle took me down there as a prank. The way the light filtered through the dirty windows, the way the old stains swallowed light and the old implements reflected it to be brighter than bright, was too much. It made me think of ghosts, dead bodies, and zombies dragging me down the drains. It gave me nightmares for months. That's why I stayed out of the basement, even though that's where the smell was coming from. But one night, maybe 2 months after my aunt died, I had a nightmare that sent me stumbling downstairs for my mother. She wasn't in her room or the bathroom or any of the other rooms. That meant she either wasn't home, or was in the basement. I went down to the basement. The stairwell reeked of blood. It got stronger and stronger the farther down I went, until it was practically choking me. I heard her voice behind the basement door. I heard my aunt's voice, too. I tried the door. For once, it was unlocked. I walked in on my mom peeling the bloody skin off a man's back and shaking it out like a bedsheet. My aunt was next to her. She was alive, but wrong. She was patchwork. Her skin was blotchy and all different colors and textures. There were big scars along some patches, mild scars on most, and stitches on a few. She's here, you know. My aunt. She's in Ward 2. Anyway, I told myself it was just another nightmare, and went back upstairs. But I didn't sleep. Everyone knows kids are scared of monsters. No one really admits that the only thing kids fear more than monsters are their parents. The love overrides the fear, usually. But I bet even you can recall a time or two when the anger of your mom was infinitely more terrifying than the wrath of God. I think the scariest thing for a kid is having to realize that your parent is a monster. That night, I had that realization. It was so horrible that I did everything I could to convince myself I was wrong, that I told myself it wasn't real. That it couldn't be. That it just another nightmare, no more real than the nightmare where my mom shot me for being a bad kid. I lived in terror for 4 days. I finally decided the only way to prove it was a nightmare was to go back down to the basement. In the daylight, it was obvious the place had been transformed. It was spotless and bright and meticulously organized. Definitely an accurate reflection of my mother's personality. Because it was so clean, it was easy to see the bodies chained to the opposite wall. One of them was alive. Squares of skin were missing from his back and his arms. The borders of the wounds were puffy and wet. When he saw me, he begged for help. "I'm sorry," he said. "Please help me. I won't do it again. I won't ever do that again. Please let me out. I'm sorry for doing bad. I'm sorry. I'll stop. Just please let me go." All the old fears came roaring back. Good guys shoot bad guys. But my mom wasn't shooting bad guys. She was skinning them alive. And I was still a bad kid. Badder than ever. I'd been expelled 3 times. My grades were terrible. I started shit to keep people from starting shit with me, which meant I fought all the time. It occurred to me that I was probably the worst kid my mom knew. That broke the dam and I started crying. I was crying so hard I couldn't move. I couldn't speak, couldn't even hear the guy screaming. That's how my mom found me. I was sure she was going to take me over to that wall and cut my skin off. Instead, she took me up to the kitchen and made me cocoa. She told me she was sorry that I'd seen the man. I asked if she pulled his skin off. She said yes, she had, but she only did it because he was bad. That made me cry again. When she finally figured out that I was crying because I was scared she was going to skin me for being a bad kid, she started crying, too. She promised she would never hurt me. But I didn't believe her. Every time I made someone bleed, they told me I was a bad kid. My mom was making people bleed. She was killing people, just like the cops killed my aunt. She was a bad guy. Good guys are supposed to fight the bad guys. I wanted to be a good guy. So I called the police. That was the 3rd worst day of my life, when I got my mom arrested. Mom went to jail, and I went to a foster home. I have never felt so powerless in my life. At some point in that foster home, I remembered that I can give people instructions. Since my mom wasn't there anymore, she couldn't stop me from doing it. There's a big restriction here. My instructions only work if there's a place involved. For example, I have to say things like, stay here, or go there, or wait right there, or run over there, or walk down to Electric Avenue, or whatever the fuck. You get it, right? It sounds limiting, but it's really not. I once made my foster brother hide in the closet for almost 2 entire days. My foster parents called the police and everything. The cops talked to everyone and they tried to talk to me, but they didn't get a chance because all I had to do was tell them to go into the kitchen to talk to Brandon and they'd leave me alone. My ability to give instructions was the only power I had, and I misused it. That's what scared people usually do when they have power. And I was scared to my core. Between the instructions and the fighting, I was kind of a monster. I got booted from home to home. I started running away. Once I hit 12 or so, I started staying away. It's kind of a long story, but I eventually fell in with a drug dealer named Shay. He appreciated my ability to make people follow instructions. Unlike my mother, he wanted me to use it. I was 13, and I thought Shay was awesome. He treated me like I was awesome, too. So did his people. They all went out of their way to treat me like I was valuable. None of them wanted me to change. No one wanted me to behave differently. No one wanted me to tamp down the one thing that made me special. No one had ever done that for me before. To everyone else, I was still the bad kid. The problem child. The fuck-up who couldn't do anything right except hurt other people. But Shay and his guys made me feel like I was enough. They made me feel like I belonged. That's why I worked for him. Ran lookouts, mostly. That's actually why they started calling me the siren, because I was an early warning system. If bystanders started clumping around or if someone got too close or looked a little too hard, I sent them away. If the cops started sniffing, I tapped them on the shoulder and told them to go somewhere else. It worked every time. In return, they paid me, bought me fast food and gas station snacks, and drove me to the prison to visit my mom every couple of weeks. They were cool with what I could do for a long time, but they stopped being cool with it, and with me, once I got a peek behind the curtain and I saw that everything was beyond fucked up. You know what that's like. I know you do. I've seen your file. I didn't want anything to do with any of them after that. I wanted to leave. But that's not how it works. Especially not when you know everything. Especially not when they know you can compel anyone to do just about anything. And just like that, this thing that helped me fit in, that made me important, that gave me power, made me a target. Power becoming your weakness is such a fucking trip. Anyway, it got really bad really fast in ways I don't want to explain to you, so I had to run. I had to leave the East Coast. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my mom. 6 months later I was sleeping on the street in Las Vegas. A month after that I got into a fight and got arrested. An old warrant for drug possession with intent to distribute popped up, and it was a mess. Because I was still a minor, they contacted my uncle. When he called, I was happy. I thought he cared. I thought he was going to figure out how to get me home. Instead, he told me my mom was dead. She fell in her cell and bashed her head open. And he told me it was all my fault. He said if I hadn't called the cops, she wouldn't have gone to jail and she wouldn't be dead. That was the second worst day of my life. Learning that I had killed my own mother. I won't bore you with jail. I'll skip right to the interesting part, which is Christoph posting my bail and telling me to come with him. I didn't want to. It was that energy he gives off, the kind that makes you feel like you're trapped in a basement with a hungry monster. And I've always been scared of monsters. In my defense, Christoph would in fact be an uncontrollable monster anywhere but here. So would you, eventually. For that matter, so would I. But he won me over pretty quick, the way he wins everyone over except you. Not that it was hard for him. I was desperate for help and acceptance. He offered the first immediately and the second consistently. It felt like he was my only friend in the world. I still feel that way. Don't get me wrong. He is what he is. He's a monster, just like you and me. But the only thing separating a monster from a hero is the right purpose. That's all he wants, but they won't let him have that. If they do, their whole house of cards comes tumbling down. That's actually something you need to know, assuming you haven't figured it out yet. The Pantheon runs because of us. Because you and me and Christoph and all the other inmate workers do all the goddamned work. Now I'm going to tell you your future by telling you my past. After Christoph brought me here, they took me downstairs for rehab. Once I sobered up, they stuck me in foundational training. I did well, so they started introducing me to different inmates. They started me in Ward 2. That's standard procedure. You only started in Ward 1 because you're their special girl. You are, though. Your background is exactly what the agency appreciates and what my father in particular respects. He's really happy with you. That's why you keep getting away with making catastrophic mistakes, because he's already decided you're the kind of person we need. The agency usually has to work hard to clean up T-class agents. Look at Christoph. Look at the cleanup crew. Holy God, look at the March Hare. You think Christoph is bad, and he was, but you just wait. You're going to see the difference between a man who wants desperately to be good and a man who just loves being a monster. And look at me. They really had to clean me up. They had to catch me up on school, too. Between school, training, and fieldwork, I was basically in reform school for 6 years. But you know it? Except for the rehab part, I loved every second of it because everyone here went out of their way to make me feel like I belonged. So they started me on Ward 2. Unlike Ward 1, it's rough. More like a county lockup than a federal prison. There's tragedy and horror, just like here. But there's more darkness down there. Less redeemability. Or at least, less desire for redemption. Not because they're worse than me or you or Christoph or the rest, but because they are not safe enough, and in most cases, have never been safe enough, to have the bandwidth to even think about redemption as defined by other people, let alone want it. I get it. I've been there. Anyway, so after I passed the Ward 2 assessments, they started training me for real. It was fucking great. For the first time in my life, I was excelling at something. I finally understood how my mom felt. Excellence really is its own reward, at least under the right circumstances. Plus, I got to work with Raphael. I had a badass big brother, which was awesome. Not as awesome as having Christoph as a crazy uncle, but pretty close. You know, towards the end of field training, I almost died. The three of us, me, Raphael, and Christoph, were hunting this monster. We cornered it using the usual bats hit field agent methods. It was going well, exactly how it was supposed to. But there was something we didn't know. This monster absorbed energy from thunderstorms. And it was raining. The instant thunder roared, this thing broke its restraints and knocked Raphael out cold. Cracked his head so hard I thought he was dead. When Christoph tried to shield me, it hit him so hard he went flying across the road. That left me. This thing slid across the wet asphalt and clawed at me. Those claws sank into my stomach like a knife through butter and pulled my guts out. Look, here are the scars. The sight of my own wet entrails reflecting a flash of lightning really was something. There were things in my guts, though. Other lights. Like sparks and tiny, bright bugs. I screamed at the monster to stop. He didn't, because that's not how instructions work. So I said, go over to the truck. He did that, but his claws were still tangled in my guts, so I had to follow. But I kept calm, even when I had to feel my entrails dragging along the asphalt. Then I told him to get inside the truck. The field trucks are equipped with these portable cells, it's how we trap and transport, but to let go of my guts first. He climbed inside. I locked the cell and collapsed right about the time Christoph lumbered over. I don't know for sure if Christoph saved me. I guess he didn't. But he was the one at my side keeping me conscious on the way to the hospital. A regular hospital, too, because we were too far from the Pantheon to risk the drive. Anyway, the mission was a success and I got all the credit for it. I still had training left to do, but it was considered a formality. I was 3 months away from being a full-fledged A-class agent. Then Christoph fucked it up. He's my only friend here. I told you that. Well, it didn't take long for me to figure out that he's second class. The top of second class, sure. But still second class. I wasn't second class, I am now, but I wasn't then, so I decided to look out for him. That included keeping tabs on him. So I watched him. I watched how gentle he was with the cleanup crew. How he balanced the line between paternal and fraternal while ensuring her welfare to the best of his ability, even when it cost him. I watched him turn Petra Soro, who is the definition of an ice queen, into a drinking buddy. You know, when she decides she wants to die, he's the only one who can get her out of it? They weren't the only ones. Look, I know Christoph isn't safe. He has to be taught to see people as people, especially women, especially after reconditioning sessions. That's sick. I know it. But once he's taught to see you as a person, he is the best friend you will ever have, minus the first couple of months after reconditioning sessions, that is. I watched him fall for my half-sister, Gabriella. I watched him mellow out. I watched his teeth fall out. I watched him turn almost normal. And I watched him become happy. Then I watched as they broke the news that it wasn't real. I watched them tell him that Gabriella did it on purpose, under orders, as part of a test to gauge whether he was due for reconditioning. That wasn't the real test, though. They already know he's a simp at heart. The real test was how he reacted to the news. If he got mad, he was fine. If he got sad, he needed reconditioning. He got sad, so they took him downstairs. I waited a day, 2, 3, 4. No sign, no word, nothing. After a week, I went down to see what was going on. When I saw what was going on, my world shattered a second time. It's like I was 6 years old again, watching the good guys shoot my aunt. She's here. Did you know that? My patchwork auntie is in Ward 2. But I didn't know that yet. I only knew what they were doing to Christoph. I couldn't believe it. I asked if they were going to do that to me too. Raphael said no, of course not. Course not, Mikey. That's what we do for T-class inmates. T-class are special. They hold everything together. But they require a lot of work, and Christoph needs more work than all the rest of them put together. Then he showed me his file. His whole file, not just the G-rated version Charlie curated for you. I don't know if I've ever been sicker in my life. You now know that's saying a lot, right? When Christoph finally finished and came back upstairs, his teeth were back and longer than ever. He was funny as hell but scarier than the ghosts in the basement could ever hope to be. Scarier than anything. Scarier than watching my mom skin a man alive. It was bad. They had to teach him how to treat all the women, even the cleanup crew, like people again. I had to help. He's a good student, don't get me wrong. But knowing they'd turned this guy from an adoptive dad and a happy simp to an absolute monster was terrifying. And knowing it wasn't the first time was even worse. So I gave him instructions. I told him to go all the way across the country and stay there no matter what. My instructions are pretty powerful, but they're not nearly powerful enough to compel someone to cross the continent. He got about 100 miles away before reality kicked in and he came back. Christoph told them all about it. How could he not? He's the company man. This agency is all he knows. It's the only place that's ever treated him like he belongs. I was so afraid they were going to send me to Ward 2. Or downstairs. Instead they reclassified me to T-class. Administration played it off. They told me it wasn't as bad as it sounded. They even said if I behave and submit to testing restrictions, I could eventually return to A-class. As long as I worked very, very hard. When they said that, all I could think of was my mom. How she was right after all. That the only way I was going to get what everyone got is if I worked 10 times harder, 10 times longer, 10 times better than anyone else. And like my mom, the agency still made me feel like we were all on the same team. It was easy. I was still good at what I did. I still had a built-in family. I still had Christoph, who didn't hold anything against me and was actually afraid I'd hold it against him. I don't. I really, really don't. At the end of training, they assigned me to Ward 1. That was almost crazy exciting. Ward 1 is elite. It's where the wildest, strongest, most powerful inmates live. It's where all the other T-class inmates live. It's where Christoph lives, and I was so excited to meet other people like him. On the day I moved in, they took me to each cell, one by one. They saved my mom's cell for last. For the third time in my life, my world shattered. Up until that point, the agency of helping hands felt like a miracle. Even after my demotion, I felt like I'd been catapulted from a death trajectory into a fantasy kingdom where all my dreams had come true. Where I had friends, where I had a family, where I had a purpose. Where I belonged. When I saw her in her cell, I learned the same lesson she had to learn all those years ago. I'm on their side, but they're not on mine. When they're not on your side, it doesn't matter if you work 10 times harder, 10 times longer, 10 times better than everyone else. The only thing that matters is what they decide you are. The agency has decided that I am a T-class inmate. That means they have decided that I am a monster. After all these years, I'm still just the same bad kid. That was the worst day of my life. When I realized that nothing had changed except for the worse. That I'm stuck here forever and so is my mom. We are never getting out, and it is all my fault. That was 3 years ago and I've been a fuck up ever since. I've had a couple of periods of competency, including one right before you got here. That's how the cycle goes, very low lows, very high highs. When I'm on a high, I'm the best they've got. But when I'm on a low, I'm the biggest liability in their history. If I wasn't the director's kid, I'd be down in Ward 2 with everything else that's too dangerous to be free but too unimportant to fuck with. That's where we go when they're done with us, if we're lucky, Ward 2. If we're not lucky, we go to R&D. You know, we're really alike. To the point where it's spooky. Not identical, but similar. It's interesting, but scary as hell to me. But you know what? Our differences actually scare me more than our similarities. They make me mad too. You and I, we grew up the same, figured out we could do special things the same, used those special things to survive the same, used them to exert power the same, got in with the wrong people the same, broke the law the same, and ended up here the same. Before that, we even both ended up in jails. Except I ended up an inmate, and you ended up a jailer. That's what I don't get. Even though you used your ability to ascend a human staircase, you built your very own self with people who never had a chance against you, you're the favorite. Even though you fuck up here every other day, they have big plans for you. If you don't piss them off, and it's starting to look like you can't, even when it looks for all the world like you're trying, you'll end up in administration. I know they haven't told you. Officially they haven't told me, but trust me, the director's just waiting for your scales to come back in. No, Christoph didn't tell them. What do you mean? How would Christoph know about that? Well, I guess that's another difference between us. Christoph couldn't keep my secret literally to save his life or mine, but he kept a secret that he thought might save yours. See what I mean? I get punished, you get rewarded. And that's where we're at now. Where I've always been. You and I, we basically did the same shit. When I did it, they scrapped all their plans for me. When you did it, you turned into a rising star that even Christoph respects. You know, he can like people, he can want them, he can care about them, and every once in a while he can even love them. But he doesn't respect them. He didn't really respect Gabriella. He doesn't even respect me. Just another difference between you and me. And it's not your fault. None of this is your fault and I know it, but I hate it and I kind of hate you for it. It reminds me of how I felt back in kindergarten. Where I'd behave the same as the other kids, but they got excused and I got punished. I know I'm not being fair. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. The wrong in. Life's not exactly fair. It can go from heaven to hell in a second. Picture this, you're happily married to your best friend, you actually love your job, and you finally have saved enough money to enjoy yourself. Vivid enough? This is merely a factor in my life's equation. Well, Lou said job of 13 years due to a random change in the position's requirements. Of course, this will affect your partner. Your marriage starts to fail and your best friend becomes your biggest critic, love morphs into resentment and inadequacy latches onto every moment spent with her. Till death do us part becomes more of a hurdle than a bond. We married very early, reckless maybe, but what we had was real. Every little remark of, "You're moving too fast," felt trivial in the face of something so powerful. The years slipped by like nothing. When you're married to your high school sweetheart, everything moves with the pace of a fairy tale. We were a cliché, a Hallmark movie somehow brought to life. Every moment with her felt natural, I didn't have to be anyone but myself. I thought we'd be together until the very end, no matter what blew our way. But even the smallest hurdle can trip you. Maybe this bitterness was growing between us all along, lying dormant until the swollen bubble of discontent popped. Oh, it popped and it popped bad. I always loved Miranda and I knew she loved me, but love isn't exactly absolute. At least, our love wasn't. Through a daily dance of passive-aggressive remarks and hushed insults, my feelings for her grew cold and then blazing hot. The Hallmark movie was over, it was time for reality to take the stage. Truth be told, I hate my wife. I hate her shrill voice, I hate her judgmental eyes, I hate her unearned beauty, I hate her snide personality, I just simply and utterly hate her. With an empty bed and a head full of doubt, my body began rejecting basic needs. I haven't slept well since, stuck in a constant loop of waking up in the middle of the night to my own inner thoughts screaming at me. Why did you have to get married? You were happy single and now you can't live without her. I feel sick. I feel weak. I feel ugly. I feel unhappy. Addicted to her touch like a drug, I needed to wean myself off from her poison. Well, all of a sudden, she wanted to play hero and save our marriage. Of course, she just had to be the one. She was fine with our relationship being in ruin for months, she was fine without speaking to me for most days out of the week, and she was fine with making me sleep in the guest room for a better part of a year. But she was going to save it. The hero nobody asked for, savior of the relationship nobody wanted. Her answer for this was space, as simple as that. Space. After all that was said between us, some time apart could fix us in her mind. Either some talentless internet therapist or one of her unbearable friends gave her the idea of a separate vacation, either or, I hardly pay attention to what she says anymore. We would detoxify and create new memories to share with each other, or some other vapid way of describing getting drunk with strangers. Whatever. I didn't care anymore, getting a week away from her would be good for me. I threw some bags together out of spite, loaded up my car with the least amount of effort, and drove off into the distance with no direction in mind. I could see her waving in my mirrors. Though she shrunk with distance, her smile never did. Denial has taken her, trying so desperately to change our fairy tale's ending. When I finally stopped thinking of her, that's where I would stop and stay. A grueling 6 hours into the endless drive, it was well into the night and my determination was fading. I don't know exactly where I am, but I found myself in some southern mountain town. Well, I suppose you could call a few scattered buildings a town. I don't really know what qualifies as a village versus a town, regardless, it was rustic to put it politely. The town sign was in horrid disrepair, faded beyond belief and covered in thick vines. Home of miracles, and a crude symbol was set in gold over what was left. Uncanny sure, but I've stayed in worse, I'm not exactly a stranger to sketchy hostels. It was clean enough for a hick town, I suppose. I am a man of my word and found my mind Miranda-less for a time. Worst comes to worst, I could just camp out in my car until morning. Maybe I could actually sleep without her lurking around, even the thought of her perfume makes me sick to my core. Driving through the empty streets, my unease was replaced by some sort of comfort. This place just felt safe, I can't exactly put it into words. I wouldn't say it was charming, but there was something about it. An allure, a breath of fresh air. It was odd, but it felt almost euphoric just to be there. Maybe I wasn't cut out for city life after all. I need a place like this, my body needs a place like this. She's killing me, and this town felt like a cure. For as small as it was, the roads were maze-like and one wrong turn you'd be back where you started. I feel like I drove around for 15 minutes, passing the same few buildings until I found the right turn. A brightly lit sign labeled, Herd's Garden Inn, rooms available, was sloppily displayed in front of an old building on the town's furthest outskirts. Could this be a hotel? It couldn't be. It looked like a church, steeple and all. An old, medium-sized church shoddily renovated into a dingy inn. That's interesting at least. The steeple on top of the building was damaged and splintered, they must have torn off the cross. They can get rid of that, but not the vines and ivy slithering their way up the walls. For a second, an ember of doubt entered my mind yet again, only to be snuffed out by a thought of Miranda. This is the only inn in town it seems, and on second thought, sleeping in my car would be the death of me. I will be fine. Opening my car door, I was floored by the cold night air. I didn't pack anything for this climate, so I hurried into the Herd's Garden Inn. Immediately, warm perfumed air wrapped around me like a blanket. It was soothing, borderline intoxicating. Tacky wallpaper of a deep purple, embellished in gold, carelessly lined the walls with carpet the color of wine that stuck to my shoes. It was visually pleasing in its own way, though objectively hideous. A bull's skull, wrapped in vines, was mounted over what must have been the lobby. I will never understand Southerners. "Welcome. Cold night, ain't it?" a cheerful voice called from a makeshift desk. It was a stout, older man with a grin as infectious as the flu. Short, chubby, and with a balding head of frizzy red hair, this man looked like he couldn't hurt a fly. Dressed in stained and frayed clothing, he looked almost homeless. Though an oddly opulent golden bracelet bearing some sort of token shone like the sun at his wrist. "Why yeah, I can barely feel my fingers," I said, forcing out a light-hearted tone through my chattering teeth. "Well, lucky for you, the garden has just what you need. A nice room and something warm to drink," the older man chuckled. Friendly, yes, but he didn't exactly look like he was on the job. "That'd be nice. So, do you work here?" I asked. That had to be the funniest thing he's heard in years, as he almost died from laughing. He had that loud, exaggerated laugh like somebody's favorite uncle. "Work here? I own it. Augie McFalls, pleasure to meet you," he laughed, clasping my hand with both of his palms in a soft and oily handshake. The stink of alcohol and scented oils clung to his shabby clothing. My eyes began to water as the scent somehow grew stronger. "Well, nice to meet you, Mr. McFalls." Where I belonged. When I saw her in her cell, I learned the same lesson she had to learn all those years ago. I'm on their side, but they're not on mine. When they're not on your side, it doesn't matter if you work 10 times harder, 10 times longer, 10 times better than everyone else. The only thing that matters is what they decide you are. The agency has decided that I am a T-class inmate. That means they have decided that I am a monster. After all these years, I'm still just the same bad kid. That was the worst day of my life. When I realized that nothing had changed except for the worse. That I'm stuck here forever, and so is my mom. We are never getting out, and it is all my fault. That was 3 years ago, and I've been a fuck-up ever since. I've had a couple of periods of competency, including one right before you got here. That's how the cycle goes, very low lows, very high highs. When I'm on a high, I'm the best they've got. But when I'm on a low, I'm the biggest liability in their history. If I wasn't the director's kid, I'd be down in Ward 2 with everything else that's too dangerous to be free but too unimportant to fuck with. That's where we go when they're done with us, if we're lucky, Ward 2. If we're not lucky, we go to R&D. You know, we're really alike. To the point where it's spooky. Not identical, but similar. It's interesting, but scary as hell to me. But you know what? Our differences actually scare me more than our similarities. They make me mad too. You and I, we grew up the same, figured out we could do special things the same, used those special things to survive the same, used them to exert power the same, got in with the wrong people the same, broke the law the same, and ended up here the same. Before that, we even both ended up in jails. Except I ended up an inmate, and you ended up a jailer. That's what I don't get. Even though you used your ability to ascend a human staircase, you built your very own self with people who never had a chance against you. You're the favorite. Even though you fuck up here every other day, they have big plans for you. If you don't piss them off, and it's starting to look like you can't, even when it looks for all the world like you're trying, you'll end up in administration. I know they haven't told you. Officially they haven't told me, but trust me, the director's just waiting for your scales to come back in. No, Christoph didn't tell them. What do you mean? How would Christoph know about that? Well, I guess that's another difference between us. Christoph couldn't keep my secret literally to save his life or mine, but he kept a secret that he thought might save yours. See what I mean? I get punished, you get rewarded. And that's where we're at now. Where I've always been. You and I, we basically did the same shit. When I did it, they scrapped all their plans for me. When you did it, you turned into a rising star that even Christoph respects. You know, he can like people, he can want them, he can care about them, and every once in a while he can even love them. But he doesn't respect them. He didn't really respect Gabriella. He doesn't even respect me. Just another difference between you and me. And it's not your fault. None of this is your fault and I know it, but I hate it and I kind of hate you for it. It reminds me of how I felt back in kindergarten. Where I'd behave the same as the other kids, but they got excused and I got punished. I know I'm not being fair. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. The wrong in. Life's not exactly fair, it can go from heaven to hell in a second. Picture this, you're happily married to your best friend, you actually love your job, and you finally have saved enough money to enjoy yourself. Vivid enough? This is merely a factor in my life's equation. Well, Lou said job of 13 years due to a random change in the position's requirements. Of course, this will affect your partner. Your marriage starts to fail and your best friend becomes your biggest critic, love morphs into resentment and inadequacy latches onto every moment spent with her. Till death do us part becomes more of a hurdle than a bond. We married very early, reckless maybe, but what we had was real. Every little remark of, "You're moving too fast," felt trivial in the face of something so powerful. The years slipped by like nothing. When you're married to your high school sweetheart, everything moves with the pace of a fairy tale. We were a cliché, a Hallmark movie somehow brought to life. Every moment with her felt natural, I didn't have to be anyone but myself. I thought we'd be together until the very end, no matter what blew our way. But even the smallest hurdle can trip you. Maybe this bitterness was growing between us all along, lying dormant until the swollen bubble of discontent popped. Oh, it popped and it popped bad. I always loved Miranda and I knew she loved me, but love isn't exactly absolute. At least, our love wasn't. Through a daily dance of passive-aggressive remarks and hushed insults, my feelings for her grew cold and then blazing hot. The Hallmark movie was over, it was time for reality to take the stage. Truth be told, I hate my wife. I hate her shrill voice, I hate her judgmental eyes, I hate her unearned beauty, I hate her snide personality, I just simply and utterly hate her. With an empty bed and a head full of doubt, my body began rejecting basic needs. I haven't slept well since, stuck in a constant loop of waking up in the middle of the night to my own inner thoughts screaming at me. Why did you have to get married? You were happy single and now you can't live without her. I feel sick. I feel weak. I feel ugly. I feel unhappy. Addicted to her touch like a drug, I needed to wean myself off from her poison. Well, all of a sudden, she wanted to play hero and save our marriage. Of course, she just had to be the one. She was fine with our relationship being in ruin for months, she was fine without speaking to me for most days out of the week, and she was fine with making me sleep in the guest room for a better part of a year. But she was going to save it. The hero nobody asked for, savior of the relationship nobody wanted. Her answer for this was space, as simple as that. Space. After all that was said between us, some time apart could fix us in her mind. Either some talentless internet therapist or one of her unbearable friends gave her the idea of a separate vacation, either or, I hardly pay attention to what she says anymore. We would detoxify and create new memories to share with each other, or some other vapid way of describing getting drunk with strangers. Whatever. I didn't care anymore, getting a week away from her would be good for me. I threw some bags together out of spite, loaded up my car with the least amount of effort, and drove off into the distance with no direction in mind. I could see her waving in my mirrors. Though she shrunk with distance, her smile never did. Denial has taken her, trying so desperately to change our fairy tale's ending. When I finally stopped thinking of her, that's where I would stop and stay. A grueling 6 hours into the endless drive, it was well into the night and my determination was fading. I don't know exactly where I am, but I found myself in some southern mountain town. Well, I suppose you could call a few scattered buildings a town. I don't really know what qualifies as a village versus a town. Regardless, it was rustic to put it politely. The town sign was in horrid disrepair, faded beyond belief and covered in thick vines. Home of Miracles, and a crude symbol was set in gold over what was left. Uncanny sure, but I've stayed in worse. I'm not exactly a stranger to sketchy hostels. It was clean enough for a hick town, I suppose. I am a man of my word and found my mind Miranda-less for a time. Worst comes to worst, I could just camp out in my car until morning. Maybe I could actually sleep without her lurking around. Even the thought of her perfume makes me sick to my core. Driving through the empty streets, my unease was replaced by some sort of comfort. This place just felt safe. I can't exactly put it into words. I wouldn't say it was charming, but there was something about it. An allure, a breath of fresh air. It was odd, but it felt almost euphoric just to be there. Maybe I wasn't cut out for city life after all. I need a place like this, my body needs a place like this. She's killing me, and this town felt like a cure. For as small as it was, the roads were maze-like, and one wrong turn you'd be back where you started. I feel like I drove around for 15 minutes, passing the same few buildings until I found the right turn. A brightly lit sign labeled, Herd's Garden Inn, rooms available, was sloppily displayed in front of an old building on the town's furthest outskirts. Could this be a hotel? It couldn't be. It looked like a church, steeple and all. An old, medium-sized church shoddily renovated into a dingy inn. That's interesting at least. The steeple on top of the building was damaged and splintered. They must have torn off the cross. They can get rid of that, but not the vines and ivy slithering their way up the walls. For a second, an ember of doubt entered my mind yet again, only to be snuffed out by a thought of Miranda. This is the only inn in town, it seems, and on second thought, sleeping in my car would be the death of me. I will be fine. Opening my car door, I was floored by the cold night air. I didn't pack anything for this climate, so I hurried into the Herd's Garden Inn. Immediately, warm perfumed air wrapped around me like a blanket. It was soothing, borderline intoxicating. Tacky wallpaper of a deep purple, embellished in gold, carelessly lined the walls with carpet the color of wine that stuck to my shoes. It was visually pleasing in its own way, though objectively hideous. A bull's skull, wrapped in vines, was mounted over what must have been the lobby. I will never understand Southerners. Welcome. Cold night, ain't it? A cheerful voice called from a makeshift desk. It was a stout, older man with a grin as infectious as the flu. Short, chubby, and with a balding head of frizzy red hair, this man looked like he couldn't hurt a fly. Dressed in stained and frayed clothing, he looked almost homeless. Though an oddly opulent golden bracelet bearing some sort of token shone like the sun at his wrist. "Why yeah, I can barely feel my fingers," I said, forcing out a light-hearted tone through my chattering teeth. "Well, lucky for you, the garden has just what you need. A nice room and something warm to drink," the older man chuckled. Friendly, yes, but he didn't exactly look like he was on the job. That'd be nice. "So, do you work here?" I asked. That had to be the funniest thing he's heard in years, as he almost died from laughing. He had that loud, exaggerated laugh like somebody's favorite uncle. "Work here? I own it. Augie McFalls, pleasure to meet you," he laughed, clasping my hand with both of his palms in a soft and oily handshake. The stink of alcohol and scented oils clung to his shabby clothing, my eyes began to water as the scent somehow grew stronger. Well, nice to meet you, Mr. McFalls. Stop what you're doing right now. Imagine for a moment that everything you think you know about death is completely wrong. Imagine that the mysteries of what happens when we take our last breath have already been solved, hidden in an ancient text written over 1,000 years ago. What if this text doesn't just speak about the afterlife but actually claims to guide us through it? What if missing one key moment in its teachings could mean the difference between liberation and eternal entrapment? These are not just philosophical musings or vague spiritual promises. This is a roadmap to the unknown, one that dares to go where science and belief systems have yet to tread. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and its revelations are not just profound but potentially life-changing. Think about this: despite all the technology we have, despite all the research and exploration into the human condition, there's one question we've never been able to fully answer. What happens after we die? It's the ultimate mystery, the one we often avoid thinking about, and yet it's the one truth we all share. Death comes for everyone. But what if we could finally confront this truth, not with fear, but with a sense of understanding and clarity? That's exactly what the Tibetan Book of the Dead dares to offer. For over a millennium, this sacred text has captured the imagination of monks, mystics, and even modern scientists. Why? Because it presents a revolutionary idea: consciousness does not end when the body dies. It goes on a journey through unseen realms, encountering profound challenges and unimaginable opportunities for growth and liberation. This isn't just spiritual speculation. It's a teaching that aligns eerily with modern accounts of near-death experiences, stories of brilliant lights, peaceful figures, and overwhelming feelings of calm. Could these ancient teachings and modern experiences be pointing to the same truth? Is it possible that this text holds the answers we've been searching for all along? As we begin this journey, I want to ask you a question. Are you ready to confront the ultimate truth about life, death, and what lies beyond? Are you ready to uncover what this ancient wisdom has to teach us, not only about dying but about living with greater clarity and purpose? Because once you step into this world, there's no turning back. What you learn here could change the way you see everything: how you live, how you love, and how you prepare for the inevitable. So, take a deep breath and let go of your preconceptions. We're about to dive into a realm of knowledge that could transform your understanding of existence itself. Are you ready? Let's begin. Over 1,000 years ago, deep in the remote Himalayan mountains, an extraordinary text was born. Rooted in the profound teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, is more than just a book. It is a guide, a map, and a revelation designed to illuminate the journey of the soul through the most profound transitions of existence. Compiled by visionary masters and monks, it emerged from a culture steeped in the exploration of consciousness and the mysteries of life and death. These teachings were passed down orally for generations before being written, a testament to their sacredness and transformative power. This text is not a simple narrative or set of instructions. It is a deeply philosophical and spiritual tool. Its origins can be traced back to Padmasambhava, an 8th century Indian Buddhist master who played a pivotal role in bringing Buddhism to Tibet. Padmasambhava's teachings, combined with Tibetan cultural and spiritual traditions, created a unique synthesis of wisdom. The Tibetan Book of the Dead reflects this synthesis, offering not only spiritual guidance for the dying but also practical insights for the living. The process of compiling the text involved some of the greatest spiritual minds of the time. These monks and scholars sought to distill the essence of Buddhist teachings into a form that could guide the soul through the intermediate states between death and rebirth. Their work was more than academic; it was a deeply meditative and intuitive process, aimed at addressing the most profound questions of existence. The resulting text became a cornerstone of Tibetan spiritual practice, revered not only for its wisdom but for its ability to transform fear into understanding and suffering into liberation. So why does a text written over a millennium ago still hold such power today? The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks to universal truths, questions, and fears that transcend time and culture. It addresses the very nature of existence and the inevitable transition we all face. In a modern world filled with technological advancements and scientific achievements, it's easy to feel that ancient texts might have little relevance. But the enduring appeal of the Tibetan Book of the Dead lies in its ability to answer questions science still cannot. What happens when we die? What is consciousness? Can it exist beyond the body? Its teachings resonate with people across centuries because they challenge us to confront our mortality with courage and curiosity. In fact, modern near-death experiences often mirror the descriptions found in the text. People who have been clinically dead but revived frequently report seeing a brilliant light, encountering spiritual beings, or feeling a profound sense of peace. These experiences, once dismissed as hallucinations, are now being studied by scientists and psychologists as potential glimpses into the nature of consciousness. Could it be that the Tibetan Book of the Dead, written long before modern medicine and technology, holds insights into these mysterious phenomena? To understand its significance, we must first grasp what Bardo Thodol means. The term translates roughly to the liberation through hearing during the intermediate state. In Tibetan Buddhism, the word bardo refers to a transitional state, a phase of existence where the ordinary boundaries of life dissolve, opening the soul to profound opportunities for transformation. These bardos are not limited to the moments after death, they occur throughout life as well. The text is designed to guide individuals through these states, helping them navigate the challenges and embrace the possibilities. At its heart, the Tibetan Book of the Dead serves two purposes. For those at the threshold of death, it provides a detailed roadmap of what to expect, from the clear light of awareness to the vivid visions of peaceful and wrathful deities. It teaches the soul how to recognize these experiences as reflections of its own mind, leading to liberation rather than fear or entrapment. For the living, it offers profound lessons on impermanence, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all things. By understanding the teachings of the Bardas, we are better equipped to face not only death but also the transitions and uncertainties of life. Imagine a text that not only prepares you for the greatest mystery of existence but also transforms the way you approach your everyday life. That is the essence of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It is a manual for the soul, a guide to navigating the unknown with clarity and grace. Whether you are seeking answers about the afterlife or looking for wisdom to enhance the way you live, its teachings remain as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. This enduring relevance is a testament to its universal appeal. It bridges the gap between ancient spiritual wisdom and modern explorations of consciousness. It invites us to think deeply about the nature of life, the inevitability of death, and the possibilities that lie beyond. By studying the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we are not just exploring an ancient tradition, we are stepping into a conversation that spans cultures, philosophies, and centuries, a conversation that could change the way we understand existence itself. In Tibetan Buddhism, the concept of the bardas is central to understanding both the mysteries of death and the transitions of life. Bardas are transitional states, spaces between one phase and another, where the boundaries of existence dissolve, revealing opportunities for profound transformation. These states aren't confined to the moment of physical death, they occur throughout life, marking times of uncertainty, change, and potential growth. The word bardo itself translates to intermediate state, a phase where nothing is fixed and everything is in flux. This impermanence, though often unsettling, offers the possibility of liberation. Consider the moments in your life when everything familiar seemed to fall away. Maybe it was a major life change, a loss, or a time of deep introspection. These are examples of bardas in everyday life, periods where the old has ended, and the new has yet to fully begin. Tibetan teachings remind us that these transitions are not obstacles but opportunities. They challenge us to let go of attachments and see clearly the nature of our minds. By understanding the bardas, we can approach these moments with awareness, using them as gateways to greater clarity and insight. Mr. McFalls? That makes me feel old. Please call me Augie. The garden is my baby. Me and my sister Amelia really shaped this place up. Oh, it was so tragic before we got here. You should have seen it. Well, I always loved a fixer-upper, he chimed, eyeing me up like I was something miraculous and unknown. To be honest, I almost thought your sign was mistaken. It just looks so much like a dash. I was quickly cut off by Augie's obnoxious chuckle. A church? Kenai, buddy. Well, it was, funnily enough. Mill Point Ministries was its name. Real shame, the pastor was a sour character and just decided to abandon it. A lot of false prophets out there. Oh, what was his name? Danny, well, it doesn't matter. It died soon after. I couldn't help myself when I saw such a pretty little building in ruin. He droned on, gently running his hand across the patchy wallpaper. It's definitely an interesting spot. Never can say I've slept in an old church before. Well, it's been a long drive, so a room would be great. As long as you don't expect me to get up early for a sermon. I joked, only for Augie's smile to die for a second. Augie McFalls was a man who looked like he wasn't built for a frown. An unnatural labored expression twisted his face before twitching slowly back into a smile. Augie put a clammy hand on my shoulder. You know, friend, I used to preach a bit at the Eternal Jubilee. It's a church a few miles from here. Me and its pastor, Lysander Sinclair, go way back. Long, ancient history. I was one of his first followers, in fact. Though I left the congregation over some differences. We have an arrangement of sorts. I would love to set you on the right path, though. Salvation comes at its own pace. After all, we are in the home of miracles, he smiled, gesturing to his bracelet. Lysander Sinclair? Like the rock star? I thought he died of an overdose decades ago. That or beat a prostitute to death, I can't remember. I may have sounded rude, but why would Augie McFalls of Town No Name have connections to a top 40er? An especially controversial top 40er, I may add. Holy harem was more of my dad's thing, but I've heard about the scandals. Lysander Sinclair, Rico St. Wild, Randy Rain, and Adam Swift were ousted from the spotlight. Their reputations never recovered, and before long nobody really remembered they existed. Not sure if the rumors were true, but they should definitely stay under whatever rock they crawled under. The very same. Tabloids do love their exaggeration. He's still kicking, but he prefers the seclusion of this town. I started off as his roadie back in the day. Oh, enough about me. I've taken enough of your time. You will be staying in the first room down that left hallway. Don't worry about payment. We will sort that out when you decide to leave. Feel free to stay as long as you see fit. If you'd like some warm spiced wine, just let me know. Amelia makes it just right. I'm good for now. I try to steer clear from alcohol. Are you sure, buddy? I simply insist. One sip wouldn't hurt. We ferment it ourselves, not one to brag, but you'll never taste anything better. Warm in a nice mug or straight from the bottle. Amelia's special recipe has no equal. It's like beauty in a bottle. Augie cheeped, simply astounded that someone might not want to try his mulled wine. Me and alcohol don't mix, I sternly replied, growing more impatient with every passing second. Well, friend, I just thought a vice or two never hurt anyone. Besides, it takes more than a cup to get you skunk drunk. You just look so cold. I'd hate it if you caught something, he bulked. Well, that's certainly nice of you. But it's been a long drive. The rooms have bathrooms with showers, right? I don't know how much of this place is, well, still a church, I asked, probably smelling like absolute death from the car ride. Top of the line. We did all the renovations. The garden is my baby after all, he chuckled, proud as could be. Augie then briskly handed me a room key before returning to his desk, humming the melody of the Crazy Chord of the Cobra King. Like a loon claiming to have seen Elvis. He had to be crazy, right? Claiming to be close with Holy Harem's lead singer and ranting about salvation. He's harmless but crazy, I'm sure. Maybe I should leave in the morning. No. I will not go crawling back to Miranda just yet. I feel free, I feel strong, and I feel alive. I don't care if this place is odd, hell, even if it's dangerous. I would rather die than let her win. My room was clearly once an office or classroom. Apparently to Augie, renovating meant faded wallpaper and tacky outdated furniture. The bathroom was merely a corner of the room, just slapped to the side. Top of the line, my ass. Beggars can't be choosers. Briskly scanning the room, I locked the door and put a chair in front of it for good measure. Crazy but harmless, I reminded myself. In that moment, I thought of Miranda again. Her beautiful hair, her silly little squeak of a laugh, her witty way of making everything a joke. I wanted to call her to see how her vacation was going. Well, fuck you, Miranda. Your ratty tangled hair, your grating cackle, and your impulsive need to tear everything down with a quick remark. She's lived rent-free in my head for far too long. A nice hot shower will take my mind off of her. I tossed my phone onto the bed and got the shower ready. The water was cold, the shower was cramped, and the transparent curtain was riddled in black mold. Closing my eyes, I started to drift deeper into the inner recesses of my mind. I needed sleep. My body felt sticky. Opening my eyes, I noticed a purplish film gathering at the drain. Stinking of a vineyard, the water pouring from the shower head gained a reddish-purple hue. What the hell, I whispered to myself, quickly flipping the shower off. It had the strong floral stink of wine, though upon second glance, the purple stains were completely gone. My body was just wet. Not a single purple drop on me. Shifting my body to avoid the shower head, I turned it back on. Just water. My body and mind were failing me, all I could do was laugh at what I've become. When out of the corner of my eye, a tall shape could be seen through the shower curtain. I recoiled and violently ripped it from its hooks. Nothing. Like a scared child, I frantically checked under the bed and made sure the door was untouched. Just an empty room. The lack of sleep must be catching up to me. Under the dim lamplight, I saw my pale, sickly reflection in the mirror. Dark circles and heavy bags lined exhausted, bloodshot eyes. I haven't looked healthy in a while. The lamp started to flicker until a different shade of bright golden light blazed from its bulb. A strong musk of incense slithered into my room, as my body felt warm and as light as air. My form started to shift in the mirror as I was left in a drunken daze. I looked like I was 5 years younger, healthy, strong, and happy. Behind me a tall, pale woman appeared, every inch of her radiating with sexuality. Her hair was fashioned in delicate golden vines with the most exquisite jewelry wrapping around her frame. She embraced me in a tender hug, resting her deathly pale head upon my shoulder, before revealing its face to the mirror. My God! It had Miranda's face, down to the last freckle. Yet it had no eyes, only a golden chain connected its sunken sockets. Bear witness, it hissed through her voice, before fading into nothing. The lamp flickered back into the dull white light and I found myself staring at my gaunt reflection. A small, shimmering speck appeared in the mirror as it began to crack. It was almost like something was shoving it through the mirror. Violently shattering into 1,000 pieces of glass, the shiny object fell with an audible clink. A golden coin now rested on the dresser, engraved with a naked man and a woman holding hands. I spun around in a manic daze, arming myself with a large shard of mirror. The door was open with the chair clear across the room. Was I drugged? Did that bastard put something in the vents? This was too real to be a hallucination. Hours had passed in an instant. My phone and car keys were gone. I don't know if I can escape, but I have to try. Naked and with mirror shard in hand, I ran into the lobby. Every piece of furniture, tall and heavy, was moved in front of the door to form a makeshift wall. I wouldn't have time, even if I could move every single shelf and dresser by myself. My only option is to find another exit. Though windowless, it may have a different exit somewhere near the back. Loud, muffled music echoed deep from the main hallway. Holy harem, of course. It was Augie. If I had to kill him, so be it. Rattle, rattle, rattle and a roll. Taste your venom, baby, take control. The element of surprise may have been lost, but I quietly slinked down the hallway. I'm not the strongest man out there, but I could definitely take Augie McFalls. My best chance would be to quickly overpower him. I have reach and youth on my side. Though, if he was armed, that's an entirely different story. I just have to find him. Passing several different rooms, an escape was nowhere in sight. The music was growing louder and louder, until it led me to the source. A set of large double doors were slightly cracked, revealing a dim glow of light. The sanctuary. Keeping the mirror shard extended in front of me, I peered through to make sure he wasn't lurking in a dark corner. Shaking, I entered through the gates of hell. Barely lit, most of the medium-sized sanctuary was wreathed in darkness. Something awful happened here. Old, weathered pews were hectically scattered all across the room. Large wooden crosses were set into the walls, littered in 1,000 nicks and hateful gashes. Under a harsh light, a golden calf was placed on the center podium. Dozens of red-purple bottles surrounded the idol like some type of offering. Dear God, I mouthed, not even being able to muster a whisper. I steadily made my way around the pulpit, with my heart falling with every creak of its derelict wood. A side door was open. It was the back room of the pulpit, fully lit, with the sound of Augie humming along with the song inside. Peeking around the door frame, I could never forget what I saw. An older woman, thin and gray, was strapped to a chair. Sickly yet beautiful, she looked like every labored gasp may be her last. Her arms were slit, oozing a deep crimson into dishes placed under her. Stained wine bottles filled rickety shelves, each filled to the brim with darkly colored vintages. "Augssssstttttt," she croaked, every sound seasoned with pain. Augie, wearing nothing but a golden wreath upon his head and a leopard pelt draped on his shoulders, gently ran his fingers through her brittle hair. She weakly recoiled against his touch, only for him to place a single finger upon her mouth. "SHSHSHSH, my beloved Maenad. I only need a drop more. The bull will give you strength, as you give us strength. You are one. We are one. We knew the price," he said bitterly on the verge of tears. Grabbing a bottle, he poured a few drops of the dish's contents into the deep purple liquid. "I know you're there, friend. There's no need to be afraid, I bear you no ill will. Trust me, there is no running at this point. Come," Augie called, never turning to face me. "What the hell is this?" I sobbed through intense fits of gagging. He turned to me with glassy eyes and a forced smile. "Beauty in a bottle," he whispered. "I'll kill you, you goddamn monster. I'll slit your fucking throat without a second thought." Monster? No. Just a man in debt. Miracles cost a heavy sum, and by the looks of it, you've been given an offer. Augie grimaced, flashing the razor blade concealed within his hand. "WW, what is going on?" I screamed, all hopes of escape extinguished. Well, the bull sees beauty in all of us, but is especially drawn to the physically blessed. He thirsts for beauty and requires a chosen harvest. A harvest all of his followers may enjoy. You are not beautiful, friend, you cannot be a blessed Maenad, and thus you are in no danger by my hand. But you may partake, and as one of the coin, you will partake. You're deranged. You know, I saw you in a dream. Lysander thinks he's the only one with visions. A fool, but the favorite fool. I saw a pale, sickly runt coming to my doorstep in need of help. Well, friend. The bull can help, at a price. He can give you anything you desire, youth, wealth, a new wife. Hell, he can give you 1,000 wives, it doesn't matter. His power is absolute, yet you must repay your coin. It didn't feel as if I was talking to Augie McFalls, but rather evil given flesh. What did you say? Your whore wife brings you nothing but suffering, the bull can give you everyth dash. I lunged at him with the shard in hand and every intention to kill him in my heart. I was set in a murderous daze, a frenzy of tears and clumsy slashes. Every moment spent with Miranda, every laugh, every cry, every kiss was a stab aimed at his throat. His arrogance fading, Augie did his best to evade the jagged edge in a clunky panic. In a state of fight or flight, Augie responded with heavy swipes of his razor blade. Fat and awkward, Augie wasn't nearly as quick as he hoped, sustaining several cuts to his forearms. Aiming for his exposed neck, I threw myself at him with the shard's point. Stumbling to the side, Augie evaded the killing blow by slamming himself into the full shelves. Collapsing under his weight, broken glass and wine now littered the floor. I crashed into the old woman with a gruesome thud. Her eyes were weak and confused, but almost grateful. A deep red now stained my hands, the shard was lodged deep into her throat. Her icy blue eyes never left mine, gently grabbing onto my side with scrawny bound hands. Choking on the taste of death, she tried to speak through horrid gurgling. Leave. Do. What? I couldn't. Her grip grew weak, as her writhing slowly stopped. It was quick, in her state, she couldn't muster more than a few moments of life. Augie hobbled over to her, desperately trying to cover the wound with his bare hand. Wailing like a pig, Augie rested his head on her blood-soaked chest. You have no idea what you have done, he squeaked, squeezing her hand longingly. Trembling, Augie desperately looked around the room, scanning every recess in pure terror. The music abruptly stopped. A powerful scent of incense filled the room, sweet and appalling. The adrenaline was immediately sucked from my body, turning me into a shivering mass of fear and mortality. We were not alone. The sparse lights of the sanctuary burst one by one, bathing it in true darkness. The back room's lighting began to flicker, before gaining the sickening golden hue. The sound of bare feet on wood echoed out from the empty sanctuary, heavy slow steps that rocked me to my very core. I could feel it in my spine. From the darkness of the sanctuary, a shape contorted its massive form to slide through the door frame. It was like a Renaissance statue given flesh, tall and terrible. Its body was pale as marble, silken and smooth yet shimmered with sickly sweet oils and gold dust. Intricately chiseled, every inch of its impressive body was teeming with muscle. Heavy rings engraved with unspeakable acts lined its massive arms, ending in cruel hands bearing gilded fingernails. It had no genitals, save for a large coin wound to its crotch by grapevines, embossed with the signet of a wailing hoplite. Between its impossibly broad shoulders, a single golden bull's horn grew from its neck, taking the place of where a head should be. Long and sharply pointed, its head horn was vulgarly engraved in a canthus vine, with gaudy incense burners dangling from its curve. What is that? An inquisitor. Reaper sevenfold of broken deals, Augie choked, turning even paler than the figure. Ripping the bracelet free from his wrist, Augie threw it at the thing's feet. Turning into a stammering puddle of tears and urine, Augie fell to his knees. I have been faithful to the bull. I have given and given and given. But I will give more, I promise. I will give tenfold. Hundreds. I will find another, I just need more time. A deal can be made. A deal can always be made. Augie shrieked, groveling before the thing. You can't argue with the divine. Reaching out its hand, it caressed his cheek gently with its knuckle. With a lackadaisical flick of its wrist, the thing sent Augie flying into a wall with a deafening crunch. Its knuckles turned his face into a cave of splintered bone and bloody mush. It proceeded to tear his battered body into 7 different pieces, before picking up his coin. Turning to me, it slowly walked backwards into the darkness as the light flickered back into its normal hue. I stayed there for hours, not even moving an inch, trapped in a cage of every emotion possible. No thoughts were left after that. I don't know exactly how or when, but I eventually left the sanctuary. Everything after that is a daze. I remember finding an exit, but actually getting there is a blur. Seeing the light of day gave me no relief, no happiness, nothing. My car was gone and off in the distance. A dozen naked people were staring from the treeline. I slowly inched back into the inn. There is no escape. I failed the dying woman, I failed myself, and I failed you, Miranda. I wish it turned out differently for us. I never tried to understand what you were going through. It must have been hard. I was bitter and hurt, my ego was in ruins and I had no idea what my future held. I guess I just expected you to swallow all of the poison I'd spew. Like a dog licking at its own wound, all I could do is wallow in my own self-hatred. You had the strength to try to fix us and yet I abandoned it at the first wall we hit. You are stronger than me, always have been. Miranda, if you are reading this, I love you. I didn't leave the light on. I moved into my new apartment 2 weeks ago. It's a small, 1-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor of an old building downtown. The rent was cheap, and I was eager to get out of my cramped, noisy place. The apartment wasn't much, worn-out carpets, faded wallpaper, and ancient appliances, but it was mine. Finally, a space to call my own. The first night I stayed there, I felt strangely uneasy. It wasn't anything specific, just the sort of nervousness that comes with being in a new, unfamiliar place. But by the time I climbed into bed, I had forgotten all about it. The city outside my window was quiet, and I drifted off quickly. When I woke up the next morning, the kitchen light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off before I went to bed. In fact, I always double-check the lights when I leave a room. But there it was, bright and glaring, casting a sharp shadow across the counter. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just too tired and had forgotten. The place was old, the wiring probably wasn't great. The next night, the bathroom light was on. I hadn't even been in there before bed. It was as though someone had turned it on in the middle of the night. But I convinced myself it was another oversight on my part. Old building. Faulty wiring. It wasn't a big deal. But the pattern continued. Every night, a different light would be on when I woke up. The living room, the hallway, the bedroom lamp. It was always something. And it was always after I had turned everything off and settled in for the night. I started to get paranoid. Maybe I wasn't turning the lights off as carefully as I thought. Maybe I was sleepwalking. I started setting up my phone to record at night, just to see if I could catch anything unusual. The first time I checked the footage, I was met with a blank screen. No recording at all. I had been charging the phone, so the battery wasn't an issue. The file was there, but it was completely empty, as though it had never even been turned on. That's when I decided to do something about it. The next night, before bed, I unscrewed the bulbs from every light in the apartment. If they couldn't get power, they couldn't turn on. I was sure this would fix the problem. I went to bed feeling smug, convinced I had outsmarted whatever was happening. But the next morning, I woke up to a nightmare. Every single light was on again. I shot out of bed, my heart racing, and ran to the living room. The bulbs I had unscrewed the night before, they were screwed back in. And they were all glowing brightly, as if they had never been touched. But that wasn't the worst part. My furniture had been rearranged. The couch, the chairs, even the coffee table, everything was moved. And it wasn't just haphazardly placed. No, Everything was positioned carefully, deliberately, as if someone had spent hours aligning each piece, making sure it faced my bed. I froze, staring at the scene. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. But it didn't. There, in the middle of the living room floor, was a mirror. One I didn't own. And in the mirror, written in what looked like dust or ash, were 3 words. Stop unscrewing them. That was it. I couldn't stay here any longer. I grabbed my things, slammed the door behind me, and ran. I've been staying at a friend's place for the past few days, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever is in that apartment is still following me. The lights are still out of control, and I know it's only a matter of time before it finds me again. If you're reading this and you ever notice the lights turning on when they shouldn't, don't ignore it. Don't go back. Whatever is in the dark is far worse than you can imagine. I'm the manager of an apartment complex that does and doesn't exist. As I'm making this public, I suppose I should probably let you all know who I am. The residents here call me a lot of things, some not so pleasant, but I won't share those. My name is Alexander, but I honestly don't really mind what you call me if you need to call me anything at all. I work as the manager of an apartment complex. It's nothing really that interesting, a lot of paperwork and a lot of sitting around doing nothing until a resident needs me or I need to handle a problem of some kind. One of the perks is that I have my own apartment here, rent-free, so I get to save some cash at least. They're lenient with pets too, so I was able to bring my cat Soot. She's a sweetheart. There is an odd thing about where I work though, something that I can't really explain how it works, but it just does. Where I work both exists and doesn't exist, like some strange in-between state. Cryptic I know, but let me try and explain it a little more. Normal mail can show up here and be sent from here just fine, as long as it's properly postmarked and such. Sometimes the occasional letter or package gets lost, but that's not my problem. However, if you try giving out the address to someone, it can't be found. GPS of any kind can't pick up where we are, and even if you give verbal directions, you practically need to hold someone's hand to come and find this place. And honestly, God help you if you order food to come right to your apartment. I've had to guide so many delivery people to apartments that it's become a routine answer for me on the phone to say, "All right, what time is your food coming down the street?" I wouldn't suggest trying to come and find this place, you'll most likely drive yourself mad. Unless you're looking to move in here, then I'll offer assistance to finding this location. I just hope you don't mind having some pretty odd neighbors. As for how I ended up being the manager of this place, I really just needed a job and I wanted something that wasn't retail or food service. I'd been there, done that, and honestly I'll never go back to that. I saw an ad online about a complex needing a new manager and, having some managerial experience, I put in for it. Had the interview, went normal enough, and got the job within 2 weeks. I didn't know anything was wrong with this place when I got the job. It only started being noticeable when people were saying they legitimately couldn't find this place, even showing that it didn't appear at all on Google Maps. Where it was supposed to be was just empty, or the image would be corrupted. Then when I started actually meeting the residents, I began to understand a bit more, but I'll get into that on another day. The job pays well, I get a rent-free place to stay, I get to keep my cat, so I don't really have room to complain. I'll share noteworthy things as they happen though, maybe it'll give me something to do during my downtime. I woke up to find 5 photos on my phone I didn't take. I woke up this morning to find my phone lying on my nightstand, exactly where I'd left it. But something was off, the screen was on, the camera roll open. At first, I thought I'd accidentally unlocked it in my sleep. But as I scrolled through the photos, my stomach dropped. There were 5 new pictures. I didn't take them. The first photo was of me, asleep in my bed. It was dimly lit, the glow of my phone's screen casting faint shadows across the room. I could see myself lying there, my mouth slightly open, my hand dangling off the edge of the bed. The angle was all wrong. Someone had taken this photo while I was sleeping. I felt a chill creep up my spine, but I told myself it had to be some kind of accident, a glitch, maybe. I swiped to the second photo, hoping for an explanation. This one was closer. A close-up of my face, just inches away. My eyes were shut, but the rest of the photo sent a jolt of fear through me. Behind me, in the reflection of the mirror on my dresser, there was a shadow. It wasn't a clear figure, but it was there, something dark, humanoid, but warped and wrong. I dropped the phone on my bed, my hands trembling. My heart was pounding as I sat there, staring at the screen. It had to be a prank, I thought. Someone hacked my phone or broke in during the night. I checked every door and window. They were all locked from the inside. Nothing was out of place. I wanted to call the police, but what could I say? That my phone took pictures of me while I was asleep? I tried to brush it off as some bizarre glitch, but deep down, I knew better. I waited until morning to look at the rest. The third photo made my blood run cold. It was taken from the hallway outside my bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see myself lying in bed. But this time, the reflection in the glass frame on the wall showed a shadowy figure standing in the room. It was tall, unnaturally so, with a head that tilted sharply to one side. I stared at the image, trying to process what I was seeing. There was no way someone could have been in my house without me hearing them. Unless they still were. The fourth photo was worse. It was me again, still asleep. But now, the shadow wasn't in the reflection. It was standing right next to my bed. The face was blurred, but its outline was clear, an impossibly long figure looming over me. I couldn't breathe. My skin prickled as if something were watching me. I clutched the phone, dreading what the last photo might show. With trembling hands, I swiped to the fifth image. It wasn't of me. It was a screenshot of my phone's home screen. The clock read 3 a.m., the battery at 67%, exactly as it was at that moment. Before I could process it, the screen went black. Then I heard it, the faint click of a camera shutter. From somewhere inside the room. My wife is haunting me. I've always hated the night, particularly the last moments of consciousness before I fall asleep. I know it's completely ridiculous for a grown man to be afraid of the dark, but I hate the way the shadows grow and shrink as though they have minds of their own, broken only by the slivers of light that make their way between the gaps in the blinders over my window. I hate how the darkness gives my mind the power to materialize its cowardice, and just like that, the pile of clothes strewn across my chair is Leviathan upon his throne. But that's not really it, is it? Do you want to know the real problem with the dark? The dark makes my eyesight too good. So good, that I can see things that aren't visible in the light. To be honest with you, I think I hate the dark because I feel as though it's the only time that I can see what the world really looks like, and what a terrifying place that must be. I pondered on this as I lay in my bed at 3 a.m., the devil sitting in my chair as usual and the dead woman that haunted my apartment staring at me from the corner of the room, as usual. Did I tell you there's a woman in my apartment? Sorry, must have slipped my mind, so let me go back a bit. The year is 2021, shortly after COVID restrictions had ended and I was in my last few years of med school, looking forward to my life on the front line of healthcare, being the real-life hero I've always wanted to be. That was until something happened. No, I did something. One day I was driving my wife Sarah from her salon appointment when my phone began to vibrate in the center console, a call from my best friend Jared, and I swear I only looked for a second, but the next thing I knew my car was airborne. I'd smashed into the edge of a turnpike, immediately flipping the vehicle over. The actual event lasted only a few seconds, but the feeling? Must have been hours. The doors caved in and windows shattered in patterns that were almost beautiful. I saw my wife's freshly cut and washed hair twist and spin in the wind as we rolled around at terminal velocity, all of which ended in an abrupt stop when we crashed into a tree. I sat in my seat, being held in place only by my seatbelt. Staring in horror and confusion at the empty passenger seat from which my wife, who was not so prepared, had been ejected and now lay sprawled on the roadside. After what seemed like hours, the paramedics arrived, and what I imagine was a first-timer attempted CPR for much longer than was necessary until an older, more experienced medic placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, signaling him to stop. Ultimately, she was pronounced dead on the scene. Now I am haunted, not just mentally, but by a presence slowly manifesting in my home. I didn't notice her the first few months. She was nothing more than a peripheral vision, something I only saw when I walked past mirrors or turned around too quickly, but soon it became inexplicable and beyond that, inexcusable. Her presence was most pronounced in the moments before I fell asleep, breathing in my ear and caressing my hair in the same loving way she did when she was alive. I never believed in ghosts. Being the man of science I was, it was ridiculous to think that anything exists once bodily functions cease, but here we are. After the accident, I stopped leaving the house altogether, subsisting exclusively on a diet of ramen noodles and Doritos, only leaving my trash-filled apartment to collect my weekly ration. I imagine I'd flunked out of med school by then. I don't know. I stopped checking my emails as they were full of obligatory condolences from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I was a mess. So when I started seeing her appear in my apartment, in some weird way I was actually glad for the company. She never spoke to me outside of a staticky voice in the phone, but her presence made me strangely grateful to be alive and reminded me that she would hate to see me this way. Fast forward to the present day. It's been 3 years since the accident, and the ghostly apparitions had since stopped as my life began to return to some form of normality. I had re-enrolled in school and started my internship at the local hospital, and that was where I met her. Emily, one of the nurses at the hospital. She had long brown hair and rolling hips that made you want to watch her walk away. Things started off innocently enough. Little glances from across the hall and polite conversation in the elevator, but soon I found myself hoping I'd run into her on my rotations. Which is exactly what happened. In fact, much to my surprise, these run-ins magically became more frequent. Almost as though we were subconsciously looking for each other. "How are you today?" she said sweetly. "Much better now," I said in my head, and accidentally out loud. She giggled and left the elevator. Soon enough I found myself complimenting her appearance. Compliments turned to flirting, which turned to making out in unoccupied rooms, and before I knew it I had a girlfriend. I wasn't sure I was ready for a relationship, but the way her eyes lit up and her voice lilted when she spoke to me was far too convincing to pass up. I wanted to take things slow though, so whenever things got too hot and heavy I would always, much to her annoyance, put a stop to it. I hadn't had sex since my wife died, and until I met Emily, I wasn't even sure I wanted it anymore. This continued for about a month until I felt ready, and so one day when we were both off shift, I invited her over to my apartment. She had never been to my place before, so I spent all day cleaning and getting it ready. Up until that point I hadn't had the heart to take down the pictures of my wife, but I knew it was time to let go, and so with great pain I removed each picture from the wall, placing them in a shoebox that I then put in my closet. Emily came over at about 5:45. She wore a blue dress with floral print and greeted me with a kiss at the door. Our dinner was full of laughter and light-hearted conversation, something I hadn't had in a while. After which we sat on the couch with a bottle of wine. We both knew what was up, so as soon as we touched the seat we began kissing like horny teenagers excited for their first time. The sex was passionate and better than either of us could have imagined. We lay naked cuddling on the couch, post-coital bliss engulfing us. But for some reason I felt watched. Like there were eyes burning themselves into the back of my head. Judging me. Contemptuous. This continued the next few times she came over, and things only got stranger. Lights flickered and doors slammed. It felt as though every time she touched me the house would protest in some way, and it wasn't just when Emily was around anymore. I began seeing Sarah again, but this time it was different. She wasn't just a flash in my periphery, she had become a permanent fixture in my apartment, appearing every time I turned off the lights or looked in the mirror, and now, she seemed angry. Her face was in a permanent scowl and her empty eyes followed me around the room. I never mentioned any of this to Emily. I figured I should wait at least a few months before I start sounding batshit crazy, but one night, it all came to a head. Emily lay in bed next to me, soft breaths leaving her mouth as she slept, but sleep did not find me that easily. Instead, I stared at my dead wife as she stared back, and then she did something she had never done before. She began to approach the bed with silent footsteps, and in the blink of an eye she was on top of Emily with both of her pale hands around her neck. Her eyes shot open with fear and confusion as Sarah strangled her. I attempted to free Emily, but her grip was ironclad. All I could do was beg and protest as I watched the life leave my girlfriend with wheezes and gasps, and just as it had started, it was over. Emily's hands stopped clawing at Sarah and her arms fell limply to her sides. She was dead. Sarah's grip loosened and she turned her attention to me, speaking for the first time since her death. Two simple words that would haunt me forever. "You're mine." I made it to work early today. I actually got to work early today, and only one other coworker was there at the time. We were prepping for an evening event, but it was still midday and sunny. I was the lead for the upstairs concession stand, and she the downstairs, with more coworkers scheduled to arrive a half hour after us. My coworker asked me to grab a few cases of water and pop from the walk-in fridge. Let me preface, this building is an old stadium for a vehicle track at our state fairground. From the concession stand, you go into the fair's storage room. This is a large room full of carnival ride parts and mirrors and a couple of decommissioned rides from fairs past, as well as other miscellaneous stored things. Then, there's a weird little hall with unknown to me rooms. You take a left, and the very old walk-in fridge is there, with some dilapidated stairs beside it, but no one uses them anymore for safety reasons. It's always given me the creeps because it's very dimly lit, and you may catch your own reflection, or a life-size clowns that belongs on a carnival ride. But, it's part of my job to stock the stand, and no one newer than me was here to pass the job on to. So, I grabbed my cart, and went in. I got the usual hairs standing on the back of my neck and the increased heart rate, but I managed to get all the cases we needed to set up, and started to head back out. Except, when I opened the old, heavy door of the fridge, I noticed the dim lighting had totally gone out behind me. Super creepy, but not too crazy for a building built in 1894, obviously. Updates have been made since, but I wouldn't guess too many. I turned on my phone's flashlight and began to push my cart through the hallway and back into the large storage room. I am not kidding you, my will jammed and my phone's flashlight turned off simultaneously. I fumbled with my phone for a second, and opted to just try and manhandle the cart full of liquid weight through the maze of carnival junk, when one of the alarms on an old game started to blare, red light flashing, lighting up the room with each turn of the siren. Everything in me became an adrenaline-fueled flight out of there. I switched to the other side of the cart and pulled, dragging the stuck wheel along until I made it to the door out. I slammed my weight into it, and in the same motion, dragged the whole cart through. I made it back to the light of day. I'm sure everything about me read terrified, and my coworker asked me if I was all right. I asked her if she had heard the alarm go off. She told me that she did not. She looked so confused, that I have to believe her. I really don't know how she could have missed it. Even if she didn't see the red lights, it was so loud. Everyone I work with has a ghost story from this building. I guess I've earned mine. I looked at the stairs, and they looked back at me. For some context, when I was a kid, my grandmother always told me to avoid staircases at night. They're bridges between worlds, she'd say, her voice low and grave, as if she knew something no one else did. When it's dark, and the house is quiet, the stairs aren't yours anymore. They belong to something else. I laughed it off, like any kid would. But when she passed, and I inherited her old creaking house, I stopped laughing. The stairs in her home always felt strange, too steep, too narrow, the wood slick under my feet as though it wanted me to slip. After I sold that house, I swore I'd never live in another old place. But when Lily showed me the Victorian on Elmwood Drive, I felt that old unease creep back up my spine. "It's perfect," she said, spinning in the foyer. Her smile was so wide, so full of hope, that I couldn't say no. The house loomed around us, its tall ceilings casting long, jagged shadows that moved even when nothing else did. Dust hung in the air like a fog, and the wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, revealing the splintered bones of the walls beneath. But it was the staircase that held me captive. It coiled up from the center of the house, an imposing spiral carved from some dark, oily wood. Its banister was smooth, gleaming unnaturally in the dim light, and the steps were impossibly deep, as if they'd been built for something larger than humans. When I stared at it too long, my vision blurred, and the staircase seemed to twist, the angles wrong, the shadows pooling in ways they shouldn't. I felt it then, a pressure, subtle but undeniable, like the house itself was aware of me. Watching. "It's just a staircase," Lily said when I mentioned how unsettling it was. But even she couldn't hide the way her voice wavered, just a little, when she touched the banister. The first few nights were quiet, save for the usual creaks of an old house settling. Lily and I busied ourselves with cleaning and unpacking, but every time I passed the stairs, I felt their weight, their pull. It wasn't just their presence, it was the way they seemed to demand attention, to want something from me. The first time I heard the footsteps, I told myself it was Lily. It was after midnight, and I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound was faint at first, a soft creak, then a pause, then another creak. The pattern was too deliberate, too steady, to be random. I got up, my heart pounding, and stepped into the hallway. The stairs were empty. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice cracking. No answer. Just the oppressive silence of the house and the faint scent of wood polish that had started to cling to everything. I checked every room, but Lily was fast asleep in bed. The next morning, I found something that made my stomach turn. On the first step was a faint impression, a footprint, but it wasn't mine or Lily's. It was long, inhumanly so, with too many toes that splayed outward like tree roots. The wood beneath it was warped, the grain rippling outward as though the step had softened under the weight of whatever had stood there. When I showed Lily, she laughed nervously. "It's just an old house," she said. "The wood's probably warped from moisture or something." But that night, she stared at the staircase longer than usual, her fingers grazing the banister. The noises grew worse. What started as faint creaks became loud, deliberate thuds, like something heavy dragging itself up the stairs. And then came the whispers, low and guttural, words I couldn't understand but felt deep in my chest, like vibrations reverberating through my ribs. And then there were the dreams. In them, I was always at the base of the stairs, unable to move. The wood was no longer wood but flesh, pulsating and veined, slick with something dark and wet. Faces swirled in the banister, their mouths opening and closing as they whispered to me in languages that twisted my mind. At the top of the stairs was a figure, tall and angular, its body wrong, too many joints bending the wrong way. Its eyes were deep pits of swirling black, and its grin stretched impossibly wide, splitting its face in two. When I woke, I could still feel the weight of its gaze. I thought it couldn't get worse. But then Lily changed. I found her one night standing on the stairs, her back to me. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her neck twisted just slightly too far. "Lily?" I called. She turned slowly, her movements jerky, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Her face was hollow, her skin sagging as though it no longer fit her bones. Her eyes were black voids, and her lips were cracked and bleeding, stretched into a smile that wasn't hers. "They're beautiful," she whispered, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "What are?" I managed to choke out. "The stairs," she said. "They've been waiting for us. I tried to run that night, but the house wouldn't let me." Every door led back to the base of the staircase, its steps glistening wet and raw, the faces in the wood grinning at me with too many teeth. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They weren't words anymore but emotions, sensations, fear, hunger, longing. I fought for days, maybe weeks, refusing to climb those steps. But the house wore me down. The air grew heavier, suffocating, until it felt like my lungs were filled with tar. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe without feeling the pull of the stairs. Last night, I stopped fighting. As I stepped onto the first step, the wood shifted beneath my feet, soft and warm like flesh. The faces in the banister writhed, their mouths stretching open in silent screams. With each step, my body felt lighter, less solid, as though the house was peeling me away from myself. My skin tingled, then burned, then softened, sinking into the stairs as if I were melting into them. By the time I reached the top, I was no longer myself. My arms had twisted, bending in impossible ways, my fingers merging into long, spindly appendages. My skin pulsed with the rhythm of the house, veins spreading like roots into the floor. And then I saw Lily. She was waiting for me, her body fused with the staircase, her face stretched across the banister, smiling. Her voice echoed in my mind, soft and sweet. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" And for the first time, I understood. The house doesn't take you. It welcomes you. Whispers in the pines. The moon hung low in the blackened sky, its pale light struggling to break through the dense canopy of the forest. Alex stumbled over gnarled roots and patches of frozen earth, his breath coming in ragged clouds. He had taken the wrong path hours ago, lured by what he thought was the sound of running water. Now, he was hopelessly lost. The woods were eerily silent, save for the crunch of dead leaves beneath his boots. It wasn't just silence, this was an oppressive void. No rustling animals, no wind through the branches. Only the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. Alec paused to gather his bearings, shining his flashlight into the abyss of trees. That's when he first heard it, a faint, wet sound. Like something being dragged. The noise was distant, almost imperceptible, but it prickled the hairs on his neck. He turned slowly, the beam of his flashlight cutting a narrow swath through the darkness. "Hello?" he called out, his voice brittle. Silence. Then, the dragging sound again. Closer this time. Alec's stomach churned. He pushed forward, picking up his pace, desperate to put distance between himself and whatever was lurking out there. The dragging grew louder, punctuated by a sickening squelch. His legs burned as he ran blindly through the forest, the flashlight bobbing wildly in his grip. Suddenly, his foot snagged on something, sending him sprawling. He hit the ground hard, his flashlight skittering away. Groaning, Alec pushed himself up, his palms slick with cold mud, and something else. Something sticky. He gagged as the metallic stench hit him. Blood. His hands were coated in it. Panicked, he scrambled for the flashlight and swept it around. The beam landed on a tangle of viscera spilling out from the hollow of a tree. A deer, or what was left of it. Its ribs jutted out like broken fingers, the flesh around them shredded and glistening. The animal's head was missing entirely. The dragging sound was louder now, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. Alec spun around, the light catching a flash of movement. A shape, humanoid but impossibly wrong, lurched between the trees. Its limbs were too long, its joints bending at grotesque angles. Its eyes gleamed like wet stones, reflecting the flashlight's beam. Alec bolted, his breath hitching with every step. He didn't dare look back, but the sound of pursuit was unmistakable. Heavy, wet footsteps pounding the forest floor. He crashed through a clearing and stumbled into a shallow creek, the icy water shocking his senses. The thing behind him was close, too close. He could hear its ragged breathing, a guttural rasp that sent shivers down his spine. Alec turned just in time to see it emerge from the shadows. Its skin was a patchwork of torn flesh and sinew, glistening with blood. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a twisted mask of raw meat, the jaw unhinged like a snake's. It lunged. Alec screamed as its claws raked across his chest, tearing through fabric and skin like paper. He fell back into the creek, the icy water mixing with the warmth of his blood. The creature loomed over him, its jaw widening further, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Desperate, Alec grabbed a jagged rock from the creek bed and swung it with all his strength. The rock connected with the creature's head, cracking against bone. It reeled back, giving him a moment to scramble to his feet. He ran, clutching his torn chest, the pain blinding. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes. His vision blurred, his body screaming for rest, but he couldn't stop. The sound of pursuit faded, replaced by a new sound, a whispering. Dozens of voices, hissing and murmuring from all directions. Alec slowed, his head spinning. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into an incomprehensible cacophony. Then he saw them. Figures, barely visible in the gloom, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. They surrounded him, their forms shifting and melting into the shadows. One stepped closer, its face splitting into a grotesque grin. It reached out, and Alec's scream was swallowed by the darkness. By morning, the forest was silent again. The search party found no trace of Alec, only his flashlight, cracked and smeared with blood, lying next to the creek. The deer carcass was gone. But deep within the woods, the whispers continued. Christmas Eve on the farm will haunt me forever. Hello everyone, I want to tell you about the creepy encounter I had just yesterday, Christmas 2024. I'm still uneasy about what happened, but I don't know where else to post this and I just have to get this off my chest. For context, my M17 parents, my brother, and I recently moved to a beautiful farm in the Dutch countryside, not far from the Belgian border. The farm has been in my family for generations. It used to be a mink farm run by my grandfather, but the actual farm has long been abandoned and fallen into disrepair. As you can imagine, this used to be the perfect place for a little kid to play. I always pretended the world had ended and I had set up a camp in an abandoned farm. I truly have great memories here, but I'm not sure I will ever be able to feel at ease here again. Now, about last night. We had just finished our Christmas meal my mom had spent all day preparing. After dinner, I was told to walk the dog, but I didn't mind. I love walking through the empty fields at night and just staring at the stars. So, I went outside and walked to the old mink farm to get my boots. I've never really felt comfortable here, because my boots are stored in the abandoned house my mother grew up in. It's a truly unsettling place, perfect for a horror movie. It's an old rundown house, with a rundown and dirty interior. Since it's been repurposed as a shed, it also half looks like a murder dungeon from the Saw franchise. As a kid, I never dared enter the old house, let alone at night. Now that I'm older, I'm not that afraid anymore, at least I wasn't, until last night. As I grabbed my boots, I was already feeling uneasy, like something was watching me from the shadows of the room, but I brushed it off. After I collected my boots, I passed the gate and went into the field. I untethered my dog as she just loves running amok in the fields, but her collar does have a light so that I am still able to see her in the dark. At first, things were normal. Everything was peaceful and quiet like usual, but I just couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. It made me extremely uneasy. Just as I finally felt at ease, I heard a sound coming from the tree-line. Startled, I quickly grabbed my flashlight and shone it across the tree line. I could swear I saw something, some kind of shadow looking at me, but as I shone my flashlight I couldn't see anything. After this encounter, I just wanted to go back inside and play board games with my family, but right as I wanted to leave, my dog smelled something and ran away. I kept calling her name, but she just wouldn't listen. I could see my dog was carrying something in her mouth, but every time I got close she growled and ran away. After what must have been 15 minutes of chasing my dog, I was finally able to get her to come back to me after bribing her with a treat. I snatched the mysterious item from the ground, and as I looked I saw it was the skull of a small animal. Strange, I thought, but I assumed it must have been caught by a ferret or a bird. As I looked up I saw the shadow again. It was standing on the other side of the field. Startled, I once again shone my flashlight at it. This time it didn't disappear, but I couldn't make out any details. Although it looked vaguely humanoid, it looked tall and thin, but like it didn't have a face. It was like the beam of my flashlight disappeared as it reached to shadow figure. My dog saw it too and started to bark. Suddenly my dog ran after the shadow, and once again she wouldn't listen to my commands. When my dog reached the figure, she let out a loud cry and quickly limped back. Now I was truly terrified. I grabbed my dog and ran out of the fields. I didn't even go back to the old house to stow away my boots, I just ran for my home. When I got inside I just pretended everything was normal, and I went back to playing board games with my family. When I went to bed, I had forgotten all about my creepy encounter and just went to sleep. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a knock on my bedroom window. Suddenly I remembered my encounter and just hid under my sheets, hoping the knocking would stop. It was a slow, deliberate knock, with exactly 1 second between each knock. At this moment the dog began barking and the knocking stopped. I slept on the first floor. I told myself it must have been the wind, or some branches must have hit my window, but inside I knew the wind couldn't make such a noise. Then I heard the back door open, and a few moments later my dog started to whimper in pain again. Quickly I got up from my bed and locked the door to my bedroom. I heard footsteps walking up the stairs, and getting ever closer to my door. I turned on the lights and saw my door handle move. Something was trying to open my door. I quickly got back in my bed and hid under the sheets once more. I was trembling, my heart was racing, and I felt as though the door could break down at any moment. The knocking got louder and louder. After a few minutes it was almost like he was attempting to break the door down. After a few minutes of trying to open the door, the sound stopped. I was terrified, but at some point in the night, I still managed to fall asleep. This morning after I woke up I immediately ran downstairs and checked on my dog. Luckily she was okay, but she was shaking and very scared and tame. It was late, almost 10 in the morning, and my parents had already left to visit my grandma. Later, when I had to walk the dog again, she wouldn't leave her cage and kept pushing back and trying to go home. When I finally got back, she immediately ran back to her cage and refused to leave, even growling if I got too close. Now, I keep the doors locked, and I still have a feeling that the entity is watching me. I don't know what to do. What if this thing comes back? Do I tell my parents about what happened? Please help me. Ouroboros, or a warning. What do you think it means, Nora? Sam choked out, gaze fixated on the cryptic mural that adorned the stone wall in front of them. Unable to suppress a reflexive eye roll, I instead shielded his ego by pivoting my head to the right, away from Sam and the mural. My focus wandered to the gnawing pain in my ankles from the prolonged hike, to the iridescent shimmer of sunlight bouncing off the lake 20 feet below the cliff face we were standing on, finally landing on the relaxing warmth of sunlight radiating across my shoulders. It made for a lovely fall afternoon. The soft wind through my hair and faint birdsong in the distance coaxed some patience out of me, and I returned to the conversation. Well, I think there could be multiple interpretations. How does it strike you? I beseeched. My sole desire was for him to try. I wanted him to give me something stimulating to work with. Granted, the mosaic was a bit of an oddity. I understood how Sam would need time to mull it over. The expansive design started at our feet and continued a few meters above our heads, and it was 3 times wider than it was tall. Positioned in front of the bottom right corner, I slowly scanned the entire piece, taking my time to appreciate its craftsmanship while I waited for his answer. Despite a labor-intensive canvas of uneven alabaster stone, the work was immaculate. As smooth and blemishless as any framed watercolor I'd ever curated at the gallery. Despite the notoriously clumsy medium of chalk, the artist created a hauntingly precise and elaborate piece. And those were just the mechanistic details. The operational details were even more perplexing. For example, how did the mystery artist find and select this space for their illustration? Sam knew of the serene hideaway from his childhood, tucked away and kept secret by the location being a 30-minute detour from the nearest established trail. Upon discovery, Sam and his boyhood friends named this refuge the Giant Stairs, as the dominant feature of the area was a series of rocky platforms with steep drop-offs. From a distance, they could certainly look like massive steps if you tilted your head at exactly the right angle. Knowing where to drop down would allow you to safely navigate each of the 5 stairs, as the differences in elevations changed depending on your horizontal position on the stairs. At some points, the distance reached a very negotiable 5 feet, while at others it extended to a more daunting 12 or 15 feet. This was excluding the last drop-off. Safely descending that last step proved impossible. Between the 90-degree incline and the larger overall distance to the terrain below, Sam and his friends had no choice but to find a safe but circuitous hill that more evenly connected the landmarks, rather than going straight from step to lake. There weren't even nearby trees to jump over to and shimmy your way down to the body of water, which was also far enough away from that last stair to make leaping into it impossible. Even as I peered over the edge now, there were no obvious shortcuts to the lake. The nearest tree fell toward the opposite side of the last stair, leaving the closest landing pad for a free fall to be a decaying bramble of jagged, upturned roots. In all the summers he spent at the Giant Stairs, Sam would later tell me, he could count on one hand the number of trespassers he and his friends had witnessed pass through the area. Besides the site's obscurity, another baffling element existed. A severe storm recently impacted the area, ceasing only 12 hours prior. This meant the entire piece had been erected in the last half-day. Confoundingly, we hadn't passed a soul on the way in, and there were no tools or ladders near the mural suggesting the artist was there lately. No signature on the work either, which, from the perspective of a gallery owner, was the most damningly peculiar piece of the mystery. With art of this caliber, one would expect the creator to have plastered their name or brand across the whole contemptible thing. So sure, stumbling on it was a bit eerie. The design felt emphatically out of place, like encountering a working Ferris wheel in the middle of a desert, running but with no one riding or. What if I told you there's an invisible force shaping your health, your emotions, and even the path of your life? Imagine a power so subtle yet so potent that it influences every aspect of your existence without you even realizing it. Welcome to the fascinating world of the human energy field, a complex and dynamic system that connects your mind, body, and spirit. This force has been recognized across various cultures and centuries, blending ancient wisdom with modern scientific discoveries to reveal its profound impact on our lives. In today's video, we'll delve into the mysteries of morphogenetic fields, explore the intricacies of the etheric body, and uncover the layers of the aura. We'll also discuss practical applications and the myriad benefits of understanding and harnessing this invisible force. Stay tuned to transform your life from the inside out. The human energy field is a complex, dynamic, and invisible web that intricately connects your mind, body, and spirit. It serves as the foundation of your overall well-being, influencing every aspect of your existence, from your thoughts and emotions to your physical health and spiritual growth. Components. Electromagnetic field. At the core of the human energy field lies the electromagnetic field. This measurable and tangible energy is generated by every cell, tissue, and organ in your body. It plays a crucial role in maintaining physical health by regulating bodily functions such as the heartbeat, nerve impulses, and electrical signals that keep you alive and functioning optimally. Biofield. Beyond the electromagnetic field is the biofield, a subtle, expansive energy that extends beyond the confines of the physical body. This biofield interacts with the external world, linking your internal state to your environment in ways that science is only beginning to understand. It acts as a bridge between your inner self and the outer universe, facilitating a deeper connection and balance. Aura. The aura is a multi-layered energy system that surrounds you, composed of various layers each representing different aspects of your being. From the physical and emotional to the mental and spiritual, the aura acts as a protective and interactive shield, continuously influencing and being influenced by the energies around you. Each layer of the aura serves a specific purpose, reflecting and affecting your overall health and emotional state. Introduction to the concept. Morphogenetic fields are intricate, invisible blueprints that guide the development and behavior of living organisms. These fields shape not only our physical structures but also influence our thoughts, emotions, and actions, playing a crucial role in who we are. Rupert Sheldrake's theory. Renowned biologist Rupert Sheldrake introduced the concept of morphic resonance, suggesting that morphogenetic fields operate as a collective memory. This resonance allows patterns of behavior and development to be inherited and replicated across generations, beyond what genetic information alone can explain. Essentially, these fields facilitate a shared repository of information that influences individual and collective behaviors. Examples and implications. Consider how musical talent often runs in families or how flocks of birds move in synchronized patterns without apparent coordination. These phenomena can be attributed to morphogenetic fields acting as energetic archives, preserving and transmitting traits and behaviors. By understanding morphogenetic fields, we uncover how deeply interconnected we are, not just genetically but energetically, opening doors to new possibilities in personal and collective transformation. The etheric body serves as the vital bridge between your physical form and the subtle energy realms. It is an intricate matrix of energy that connects your tangible body with the invisible forces that influence your overall well-being. Think of it as the energetic blueprint that underpins your physical existence, facilitating a seamless interaction between your body and the surrounding energy fields. Role in energy flow. The etheric body plays a crucial role in the flow of energy throughout your system by connecting to the meridians, those intricate channels that carry chi or prana, the life force energy, across your body. These meridians are integral to maintaining both physical and emotional health, ensuring that energy flows smoothly and harmoniously. When your etheric body is balanced, it supports optimal functioning, enhancing your vitality and emotional stability. Importance of balance. Disruptions in the etheric body can lead to physical ailments and emotional imbalances. Stress, trauma, or illness can create blockages, impeding the free flow of energy and resulting in discomfort or disease. This highlights the essential need for energy healing practices, such as Reiki or acupuncture, which work to cleanse and restore balance to the etheric body. By maintaining harmony within this energy bridge, you ensure a resilient and healthy connection between your physical self and the subtle energy realms. The aura is a luminous, multi-layered energy field that surrounds your entire body, acting as both a shield and a transmitter. It comprises several distinct layers, each representing different aspects of your being. Physical layer. Closest to the body, it governs physical health and vitality. Emotional layer. Reflects your feelings and moods. Mental layer. Houses your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. Astral layer. Bridges the physical and spiritual realms. Celestial layer. Connects you to universal energies and higher dimensions. Scientific validation. Kirlian photography, a technique developed in the 1930s, captures the aura's energetic luminescence by applying a high-frequency electrical field to objects. This method visually represents the aura's vibrant halos, correlating with emotional and physical states. Additionally, Dr. James Oshman's research on bioplasma, the dynamic state of matter forming the aura, provides scientific insights into how these energy fields operate and influence our lives. Influence on well-being. A balanced aura contributes significantly to overall health and emotional stability. When your aura is vibrant and harmonized, you experience enhanced vitality, emotional resilience, and a greater sense of peace. Conversely, an imbalanced aura can lead to fatigue, emotional turmoil, and physical ailments, highlighting the importance of maintaining aura health through energy practices. Energy healing practices. Reiki is a powerful energy healing technique that channels universal life force energy into your aura. During a Reiki session, a practitioner gently places their hands near or on your body, directing healing energy to cleanse and balance your aura. This process helps remove negative energies, promoting relaxation and enhancing your overall well-being. Acupuncture plays a crucial role in balancing energy flow within the body. By inserting thin needles into specific meridian points, acupuncture stimulates the flow of qi or life force energy. This not only alleviates physical ailments but also harmonizes emotional states, ensuring that your energy field remains balanced and free from blockages. Gem therapy. Crystals and gemstones. Crystals like amethyst and citron are invaluable tools in gem therapy. Amethyst is renowned for its calming properties, making it ideal for clearing emotional turbulence, while citron boosts vitality and energizes a depleted field. Simply carrying these stones or placing them on your body during meditation can significantly enhance your energy field, fostering a sense of peace and vitality. Qi flow techniques. Tai Chi and Qigong. These ancient practices involve slow, deliberate movements and focused breathing to stimulate the flow of qi or life force energy. Regular practice of Tai Chi and Qigong fortifies your energy field, making it more resilient to external stressors. These techniques not only improve physical health but also promote mental clarity and emotional stability. Balancing techniques. Breathing exercises and mindfulness. Breathing exercises and mindfulness practices are essential for aligning the assemblage point and maintaining energy balance. By focusing on your breath and visualizing the center of your energy field, you can gently guide your assemblage point back into alignment. This not only enhances your immediate well-being but also builds a stable foundation for long-term health and resilience. Improved relationships. A balanced aura radiates positivity, making you more approachable and empathetic. This natural glow fosters deeper connections, enhancing your ability to build and maintain meaningful relationships. Harmonious energy attracts positive interactions, creating an environment of trust and understanding. Enhanced mental clarity. When your energy flows freely, your thoughts become sharper and decision-making more effective. A balanced energy field reduces mental fog, allowing you to process information clearly and respond thoughtfully to challenges. This mental clarity boosts creativity and problem-solving abilities, helping you navigate life's complexities with ease. Physical health benefits. Maintaining a balanced energy field leads to improved sleep, increased vitality, and a stronger immune system. Smooth energy flow supports your body's natural healing processes, reducing fatigue and enhancing overall physical well-being. You may experience better resilience against illnesses and a more vibrant, energetic lifestyle. Overall well-being. Nurturing your energy field results in comprehensive health and happiness. A harmonious energy balance supports your physical and mental health, while also enhancing emotional stability and spiritual growth. By caring for your energy, you establish a foundation for a fulfilling and joyful life, embracing well-being from the inside out. Bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. Scientific discoveries are increasingly validating ancient spiritual practices. Concepts once considered purely metaphysical are now being explored and confirmed through scientific research, demonstrating their profound impact on our lives. Kirlian photography and bioplasma. Technological advancements like Kirlian photography bridge the gap between metaphysical concepts and empirical evidence. This technique captures the aura's energetic luminescence, providing visual proof of energy fields and supporting the existence of bioplasma, the dynamic state of matter that forms the aura. Fusion of practices. meditation, energy healing, and prayer are now recognized as physical acts that influence energy fields. These practices, rooted in spirituality, are understood to alter the frequencies and flow of energy within and around us, merging ancient wisdom with modern scientific understanding to enhance overall well-being. Today, we've delved into the fascinating realms of morphogenetic fields, explored the intricate etheric body, uncovered the layers of the aura, and discussed practical applications and their profound benefits. These elements collectively illustrate the powerful invisible force shaping every aspect of our lives. I encourage you to explore energetic healing practices and incorporate the techniques we've discussed to enhance your well-being and transform your life. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you're integrating this wisdom into your daily life. The energy of the mind is the essence of life. Aristotle. Embrace your inner power, stay balanced, and continue to nurture your vibrant energy field. Thank you for joining me on this journey of energetic anatomy. Until next time, stay balanced, stay vibrant, and embrace the power within you. Operating the attraction. A sort of daydream come to life. The type of thing that causes your brain to throb because the circumstances defiantly lack a readily accessible explanation, an incongruence that tickles and lacerates the psyche to the point of honest physical discomfort. I could understand Sam needing time to swallow the uncanniness of this guerrilla installation. At the same time, my grace was running out. I sensed impatience bubbling in my chest like heartburn once again. I watched as he took off his Phillies cap and contemplatively scratched his head, letting short dirty blonde curls loose. Seeing these familiar mannerisms, I remembered that, despite our growing friction, I loved him, and we'd been a couple for many years. We started dating not long after he and his friends had denounced the giant stairs as too infantile and beneath their maturing sensibilities. But we had become distant, not physically, but mentally. It didn't feel like we had anything to talk about anymore. This hike was one of a series of exercises meant to rekindle something between us, but like many before, it was proving to have the opposite effect. It makes me feel, honestly Nora, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. Can we start walking back? Sam muttered, practically whimpering. I purposely ignored the second part, instead asking, "What about it makes you uncomfortable? And you asked me what I think it means, but what do you think it means?" In the past few months, Sam had become closed off, seemingly dead to the world. I recognized that the mosaic was undeniably abstract, making it difficult to interpret, but that's also what made it intriguing and worth dissecting. I just wanted him to show me he was willing to engage with something outside his own head. The background was primarily an inky and vacant black, split in two by a faint earthy bronze diagonal line that spanned from the bottom left-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner, subdividing the piece into a left and a right triangle. My eyes were first drawn to the celestial body in the left triangle because of the inherent action transpiring in that subsection. A planet, ashen like Saturn but without the rings, was in the process of being skewered by a gigantic serpentine creature. The creature came up from behind the planet, briefly disappeared, and then triumphantly reappeared by burrowing through the helpless star. As the creature erupted through, it seemed as if it started to coil back in the opposite direction to meet its tail. As I more thoroughly inspected the creature, I noticed smaller details, such as the many legs jutting off the sides of its convulsing torso, all the way from head to tail. The distribution of wriggling legs was disturbingly unorganized, a few legs here, and few legs there, etc. Because of this detail, the creature took on the appearance of a tawny-colored centipede of extraterrestrial proportions. In comparison, the right triangle was much more straightforward. It depicted a moon shining a cylinder of light on the cosmic pageantry playing itself out in the left triangle, like a stage light illuminating the focal point of a show. As its moon rays trickled over the dividing diagonal line, the coppery shading of the boundary became more thick and deliberate, extending a little into each triangle as well. From my perspective, this grand tableau was a play on the legend of Ouroboros, the snake god that ate its own tail. In ancient cultures, the snake symbolized rebirth, a cycle of life and death. More recently, however, philosophical interpretations of the viper have become a bit nihilistic. Instead of an avatar of rebirth, the snake began representing humanity's inescapably self-defeating nature, always eating itself in the pursuit of living. I believe that's what the mosaic was attempting to depict, a parable, or maybe a tribute, to our inherent predilection for self-destruction. After a minute of deafening silence, Sam finally inhaled, preparing to say something. Hope nestled into my heart, crackling like tiny embers. Those embers quickly cooled when he sputtered out an answer. I think it's a warning. I paused and waited for more, a further explanation of what he meant by the piece being a warning, or maybe more elaboration on why it made him uncomfortable. Disappointingly, Sam had nothing additional to give. In a huff, I dug furiously into my backpack and pulled out my Polaroid camera. When Sam observed that I was carefully stepping backwards to get the entire piece into frame, he pleaded with me not to take a picture. But my body was already in motion. He stood behind me as the device snapped, flashed, and ejected a developing photo of the mural. I swung it up and down vigorously in the air for a few seconds, and then I jammed it into his coat pocket with excessive force. "Kindly notify me once you have something better," I hissed, starting to wander back the way we'd arrived as I said it. Once I heard the clap of his boots following me, I didn't bother to turn around. Clutching the photo in my left hand, I tried to steady my breathing, which had a new habit of becoming alarmingly irregular whenever I thought too hard about the mural. I must have overlooked something. I turned around to exit the bedroom, gliding down the hall and into my office. Flicking on a desk light, I sat down and carefully placed the Polaroid on the otherwise empty work surface. In a methodical fashion, I studied every single centimeter of the photo, which had become progressively creased and misshapen since I had pilfered it from the trash can in the dead of night. Sam had thrown it out. He had made me watch him dispose of it. Said we needed to put it behind us. That it didn't matter. That it didn't need to be explained. What it must be like to be cradled to sleep by such a vapid, unthinking bliss. My pang of jealousy was interrupted when I noticed something of peculiarity in the top right-hand corner of the Polaroid. I had creased the photo so thoroughly that a tiny frayed and upturned edge appeared, like the small separation you have to create between the layers of a plastic trash bag before you can shake it out the inside. I cautiously dug under that slit with the side of a nickel. As I pushed diagonally towards the other corner, the photo of Sam and me standing in front of an empty wall peeled off to reveal a second photo concealed beneath it. Ecstasy spilled generously into my veins, relaxing the vice grip that the original Polaroid had been holding me in. It finally made sense. My flashlight was the moon, and the bronze diagonal line was the cliff's edge. Her head was the ashen planet, and the piercing centipede was the jagged root. And she had died to make me understand. The whole point of me understanding was so we could be more connected. In that sense, Nora had succeeded. Understanding did make me feel connected to her. Unfortunately, we now found ourselves separated by a considerable amount of spiritual distance, unable to enjoy our revitalized connection. The cost for me understanding, I suppose. Ouroboros. The mural was sort of beautiful. Or at least captivating. You could really lose yourself in the colors and the images. They were violently alive, like childbirth or surgery. In a state not unlike sleepwalking, my feet guided me to the car to retrieve Nora's Polaroid camera, and then back to the mural. Carefully, I snapped a photo of the newly mesmerizing display. Peering over the last stair, I could see Nora laid still, with the rising dawn now illuminating her cadaver. Yellow light revealed that her dying grin had become painted onto her in death. I took the time to study the expression. It was intricate, the nuances were almost hypnotic. Reflexively, I mirrored her grin, painting it on myself in solidarity. A fake expression that hid the real one underneath. Waving the Polaroid, I started towards the hill that led down to the lake and to Nora. Whatever developed, we could look at it together. The ape man follows me. There are times in life when it feels like something is hanging over your shoulder. As though the weight of the earth and the force of living tries its best to grind your spirits into a thick and unmoving paste. Living in general is just tough and can suck the passion out of even the most vibrant and interesting people. It's something I've seen all too often, so I guess I'm thankful that I never had that much passion in living to begin with. I've gone through life as more of a chore than an actual enjoyment. That sounds a lot more depressing than it actually is in my case. I've not had a bad life or a particularly exciting one either. I, for lack of a better description, am a completely average man in his mid-20s. Although I don't intend to go into depth on my own situation and what my life was like before leading up to the shitstorm of a month that I've tried and failed to endure. But I need to put into perspective what things were like before everything started to fall apart. A month ago I was working as a clinical trial assistant for a small private pharmaceutical company located north of Vancouver. My job mostly involved organizing subjects for trials on unique, specialized drugs made for rare illnesses or specific cases that fell outside of what was covered by other large private or public healthcare in Canada. It was a fine job, paid well, and I enjoy working with spreadsheets because I'm a psychopath. Accompanying that with a positive working atmosphere of generally amiable, if slightly distant, colleagues, I had a solid working life that, while nothing special or desirable, was something that left me content. My home life, however, was more befitting of a dull man such as myself. I was married to the woman who I thought was the love of my life. Grace. We had met in college and hit it off, becoming pretty much inseparable, and from there things between us grew stronger. We'd always be hanging out and spending time together. In particular, we'd grown close due to the seemingly relentless need to learn, and always loved reading books of any kind and talking about them over dinner. We'd been together for about 3 years now. But since our marriage it's felt like we've only grown further apart. We still talk and discuss things like we used to, but now things are far icier between us. She rarely acknowledges me outside of our dedicated conversation times, and I always feel that she's looking for an out whenever we're spending time together. Half-committal nods and widening of closed smiles that feel a touch too condescending to be convincing. We live together, but the once thriving life we both shared feels as though it's become a trap for the both of us. As though we never really outgrew being roommates and couldn't properly commit to being a couple. Maybe I need to be more active in our relationship? It was a thought that crossed my mind all too often that now, as I write this, feels so clear and true as the right solution. But at the time it was mixed in with the anxiety-ridden mess of soup that was my inner monologue. A voice that excluded and drowned out any modicum of coherent dialogue. I wanted to make the first move. I wanted to make her happy, Lord knows she deserved it. But I wasn't sure how. I was mulling over these solutions in my head as I drove along the road back towards our home. Turning them throughout my mind, desperately hoping I could fold the familiar pieces together into somewhat of a recognizable conclusion. All while I slugged through the dreary and monotonous path that wound along the precarious edges of these steep hills. The forest below my car's eyes shimmering with every shift in the air and swaying together. Waving up to the blinding headlights that pierced through the fog of night. A dull chill had set in not long after I had left work. Our house was roughly an hour from my work. Grace had been able to buy it due to her own line of work, which was exceedingly more successful than my own, and had taken a liking to the isolated property when we first made the joint decision to purchase the property. Of course, the downsides had become immediately present once our relationship had started to worsen with the rotting fatigue. These cold drives along the empty road being the least of my concerns. Concerns that only served to pull me further from my current scenario as I wandered further into the crevices of future worries. I needed to make things right with Grace. Maybe I could take her to dinner someplace nice on Saturday? I don't have too much work left, I just need to sign off on organizing the next animal testing for an Alzheimer's or Parkinson's trial medication. A grim thought that wasn't exactly something easy to shake this late. With weariness setting in alongside my less than desirable headspace, it was no surprise that I wouldn't see something in that inky swill that suffocated my car. The shape was upon my hood before I could even blink, and I felt my body lurch forward with the force of the impact as the car's wheel skidded, burning rubber into the ground before a second. All before a quieter crash of metal on metal echoed throughout the dark night, and I felt my face connect with the steering wheel and a taste of wet iron dripped down my lip. My ears were ringing from the sudden barrage of noise that had exploded around me from a serene and quiet night. My brain was firing on all cylinders as I lifted my face from the wheel and sucked on the icy air that surrounded the car. It stung against my open wounds, a chilling throb that assisted in bringing my mind back to the present and helped ground myself now that I was wide awake. Blinking my eyes open, I stared over to the shape that now lay motionless against the gray cement. A spray of blood cutting deep across the decimated hood of my car that trailed down to the unmoving form that slowly leaked pools of the crimson liquid across the ground. Shit. My mind raced as I hobbled out of the car door, shoving it ajar and groggily putting one foot in front of the other. What have I hit? A question that was answered with the sight of a pair of twisted antlers that stretched down alongside its lifeless head. Clawing groves into the road, a pair of striking hands slick with the blood of their owner that now hung at my feet. A moose. A baby moose. It was slightly bigger than a large dog, and its antlers were still stunted from only recently beginning to come into their own. I watched quietly as the blood trickled through its chestnut brown fur, smearing it with this thick coating of syrupy liquid. Its deep black eyes staring up at me all the while. Confusion and apprehension glistening across its slick pupils. A wave of nausea washed upwards from within my stomach as I struggled to hold myself together. I didn't do well with the sight of dead things, especially with the knowing and nagging fact that I had been the reason that something so young had been killed. The whole while I had been mumbling under my breath as a constant stream of thought that refused to let itself be contained to the contents of my skull. A spew of ramblings that now were joined by the attempts at working out my adrenaline as I was pacing back and forth before the corpse of my kill. What do I do? Repeated again and again inside my head. I wished Grace was here when I rammed the thing with my car. She'd always been more adept with killing things, in large part due to the frequent hunting trips she would go on that had only gotten more frequent in time. She would have yelled at me to calm down and then carefully prepared a plan to deal with the moose calves' remains. For a second in my delirious circling, I almost considered trying to stuff the moose into the back of my car and taking it home with me. An idea I thankfully chose to entertain no further than a passing thought. I eventually elected to shove the moose off to the side of the road, figuring that something would probably come along and deal with the body of the moose on my, or rather nature's, behalf. Crouching down beside the poor thing's corpse and tasting the tainted flavor of death that hung on the air around the moose, I readied myself to try and drag it from its place in the road. I had started to let my fingers rest along the spotless side of its body, along its spine where the mess of blood and crushed meat had failed to find footing. Only to recoil in horror as I saw the wounds that lay alongside the marks of my own car. The moose's body was wreathed in long twisted gashes that cut deep past the muscle, tendons and veins, spilling long blood from its diced organs and shattered bones. The marks all twisted in rows of 4 gashes, all trailing in the same direction back toward the beast's flanks. I took another step away from the beast, my hand sliding against the crumpled hood of the car. Blood tainted my fingertips, and with every shaking step away from the moose's body I left thin streaks leading up to the door. What could do that? A grim thought that filled my mind with all the imaginings of some grisly predators lurking on the edges of my periphery, creating a newfound sense of dread which had started to creep along my exposed fingertips, chilling the palms of my hands as they met the cold steel. Shoving myself back into the car seat, my eyes flickered along the edges of the headlight's radiance. scanning for any signs of motion with a new level of alertness and panic twitching through my body as I pulled the car into gear and was tearing off down the road once again. The flaps of metal across the hood creaking slightly as I drove onward, abandoning the accusatory eyes of that poor moose. The striking wounds along its stomach and its body refusing to leave themselves from my mind's eye and persisting the whole drive home. It didn't take me too much longer to reach the front door with the remaining actions of my night clicking by as a fragmented slideshow of events that were nothing more than the routine of falling to sleep. I had been unable to rip my thoughts away from the body of that mouse for quite a time. I was still wondering as to what kind of beast was wandering the woods which could have done something like that. My prime suspect in mind was a bear, and I was doing my best not to think past that. I had more important things to worry about. The tests and dinner plan with Grace came to mind. At the moment I was too tired to think. I could wait until tomorrow. Quietly trudging through the bowels of our home and ascending the stairs, I readied to take a right at the top of the incline, only risk a glance down the other end of the corridor. The doorway was ever so slightly ajar and I could hear the low snoring that she always denied was hers. I wanted to push the door open. I really wanted to see her, but that would have meant to overstep our already strained boundaries. My flashlight was the moon, and the bronze diagonal line was the cliff's edge. Her head was the ashen planet, and the piercing centipede was the jagged root. And she had died to make me understand. The whole point of me understanding was so we could be more connected. In that sense, Nora had succeeded. Understanding did make me feel connected to her. Unfortunately, we now found ourselves separated by a considerable amount of spiritual distance, unable to enjoy our revitalized connection. The cost for me understanding, I suppose. Ouroboros. The mural was sort of beautiful. Or at least captivating. You could really lose yourself in the colors and the images. They were violently alive, like childbirth or surgery. In a state not unlike sleepwalking, my feet guided me to the car to retrieve Nora's Polaroid camera, and then back to the mural. Carefully, I snapped a photo of the newly mesmerizing display. Peering over the last stair, I could see Nora laid still, with the rising dawn now illuminating her cadaver. Yellow light revealed that her dying grin had become painted onto her in death. I took the time to study the expression. It was intricate, the nuances were almost hypnotic. Reflexively, I mirrored her grin, painting it on myself in solidarity. A fake expression that hid the real one underneath. Waving the Polaroid, I started towards the hill that led down to the lake and to Nora. Whatever developed, we could look at it together. The ape man follows me. There are times in life when it feels like something is hanging over your shoulder. As though the weight of the earth and the force of living tries its best to grind your spirits into a thick and unmoving paste. Living in general is just tough and can suck the passion out of even the most vibrant and interesting people. It's something I've seen all too often, so I guess I'm thankful that I never had that much passion in living to begin with. I've gone through life as more of a chore than an actual enjoyment. That sounds a lot more depressing than it actually is in my case. I've not had a bad life or a particularly exciting one either. I, for lack of a better description, am a completely average man in his mid-20s. Although I don't intend to go into depth on my own situation and what my life was like before leading up to the shitstorm of a month that I've tried and failed to endure. But I need to put into perspective what things were like before everything started to fall apart. A month ago I was working as a clinical trial assistant for a small private pharmaceutical company located north of Vancouver. My job mostly involved organizing subjects for trials on unique, specialized drugs made for rare illnesses or specific cases that fell outside of what was covered by other large private or public healthcare in Canada. It was a fine job, paid well, and I enjoy working with spreadsheets because I'm a psychopath. Accompanying that with a positive working atmosphere of generally amiable, if slightly distant, colleagues, I had a solid working life that, while nothing special or desirable, was something that left me content. My home life, however, was more befitting of a dull man such as myself. I was married to the woman who I thought was the love of my life. Grace. We had met in college and hit it off, becoming pretty much inseparable, and from there things between us grew stronger. We'd always be hanging out and spending time together. In particular, we'd grown close due to the seemingly relentless need to learn, and always loved reading books of any kind and talking about them over dinner. We'd been together for about 3 years now. But since our marriage, it's felt like we've only grown further apart. We still talk and discuss things like we used to, but now things are far icier between us. She rarely acknowledges me outside of our dedicated conversation times, and I always feel that she's looking for an out whenever we're spending time together. Half-committal nods and widening of closed smiles that feel a touch too condescending to be convincing. We live together, but the once thriving life we both shared feels as though it's become a trap for the both of us. As though we never really outgrew being roommates and couldn't properly commit to being a couple. Maybe I need to be more active in our relationship? It was a thought that crossed my mind all too often that now, as I write this, feels so clear and true as the right solution. But at the time it was mixed in with the anxiety-ridden mess of soup that was my inner monologue. A voice that excluded and drowned out any modicum of coherent dialogue. I wanted to make the first move. I wanted to make her happy, Lord knows she deserved it. But I wasn't sure how. I was mulling over these solutions in my head as I drove along the road back towards our home. Turning them throughout my mind, desperately hoping I could fold the familiar pieces together into somewhat of a recognizable conclusion. All while I slugged through the dreary and monotonous path that wound along the precarious edges of these steep hills. The forest below my car's eyes shimmering with every shift in the air and swaying together. Waving up to the blinding headlights that pierced through the fog of night. A dull chill had set in not long after I had left work. Our house was roughly an hour from my work. Grace had been able to buy it due to her own line of work, which was exceedingly more successful than my own, and had taken a liking to the isolated property when we first made the joint decision to purchase the property. Of course, the downsides had become immediately present once our relationship had started to worsen with the rotting fatigue. These cold drives along the empty road being the least of my concerns. Concerns that only served to pull me further from my current scenario as I wandered further into the crevices of future worries. I needed to make things right with Grace. Maybe I could take her to dinner someplace nice on Saturday? I don't have too much work left. I just need to sign off on organizing the next animal testing for an Alzheimer's or Parkinson's trial medication. A grim thought that wasn't exactly something easy to shake this late. With weariness setting in alongside my less than desirable headspace, it was no surprise that I wouldn't see something in that inky swill that suffocated my car. The shape was upon my hood before I could even blink, and I felt my body lurch forward with the force of the impact as the car's wheel skidded, burning rubber into the ground before a second. All before a quieter crash of metal on metal echoed throughout the dark night, and I felt my face connect with the steering wheel and a taste of wet iron dripped down my lip. My ears were ringing from the sudden barrage of noise that had exploded around me from a serene and quiet night. My brain was firing on all cylinders as I lifted my face from the wheel and sucked on the icy air that surrounded the car. It stung against my open wounds, a chilling throb that assisted in bringing my mind back to the present and helped ground myself now that I was wide awake. Blinking my eyes open, I stared over to the shape that now lay motionless against the gray cement. A spray of blood cutting deep across the decimated hood of my car that trailed down to the unmoving form that slowly leaked pools of the crimson liquid across the ground. Shit. My mind raced as I hobbled out of the car door, shoving it ajar and groggily putting one foot in front of the other. What have I hit? A question that was answered with the sight of a pair of twisted antlers that stretched down alongside its lifeless head. Clawing groves into the road, a pair of striking hands slick with the blood of their owner that now hung at my feet. A moose. A baby moose. It was slightly bigger than a large dog, and its antlers were still stunted from only recently beginning to come into their own. I watched quietly as the blood trickled through its chestnut brown fur, smearing it with this thick coating of syrupy liquid. its deep black eyes staring up at me all the while. Confusion and apprehension glistening across its slick pupils. A wave of nausea washed upwards from within my stomach as I struggled to hold myself together. I didn't do well with the sight of dead things, especially with the knowing and nagging fact that I had been the reason that something so young had been killed. The whole while I had been mumbling under my breath as a constant stream of thought that refused to let itself be contained to the contents of my skull. A spew of ramblings that now were joined by the attempts at working out my adrenaline as I was pacing back and forth before the corpse of my kill. What do I do? Repeated again and again inside my head. I wished Grace was here when I rammed the thing with my car. She'd always been more adept with killing things, in large part due to the frequent hunting trips she would go on that had only gotten more frequent in time. She would have yelled at me to calm down and then carefully prepared a plan to deal with the moose calves' remains. For a second in my delirious circling I almost considered trying to stuff the moose into the back of my car and taking it home with me. An idea I thankfully chose to entertain no further than a passing thought. I eventually elected to shove the moose off to the side of the road, figuring that something would probably come along and deal with the body of the moose on my, or rather nature's, behalf. Crouching down beside the poor thing's corpse and tasting the tainted flavor of death that hung on the air around the moose, I readied myself to try and drag it from its place in the road. I had started to let my fingers rest along the spotless side of its body, along its spine where the mess of blood and crushed meat had failed to find footing. Only to recoil in horror as I saw the wounds that lay alongside the marks of my own car. The moose's body was wreathed in long twisted gashes that cut deep past the muscle tendons and veins, spilling long blood from its diced organs and shattered bones. The marks all twisted in rows of 4 gashes, all trailing in the same direction back toward the beast's flanks. I took another step away from the beast, my hand sliding against the crumpled hood of the car. Blood tainted my fingertips, and with every shaking step away from the moose's body I left thin streaks leading up to the door. What could do that? A grim thought that filled my mind with all the imaginings of some grisly predators lurking on the edges of my periphery, creating a newfound sense of dread which had started to creep along my exposed fingertips, chilling the palms of my hands as they met the cold steel. Shoving myself back into the car seat, my eyes flickered along the edges of the headlight's radiance, scanning for any signs of motion with a new level of alertness and panic twitching through my body as I pulled the car into gear and was tearing off down the road once again. The flaps of metal across the hood creaking slightly as I drove onward, abandoning the accusatory eyes of that poor moose. The striking wounds along its stomach and its body refusing to leave themselves from my mind's eye and persisting the whole drive home. It didn't take me too much longer to reach the front door with the remaining actions of my night clicking by as a fragmented slideshow of events that were nothing more than the routine of falling to sleep. I had been unable to rip my thoughts away from the body of that mouse for quite a time. I was still wondering as to what kind of beast was wandering the woods which could have done something like that. My prime suspect in mind was a bear, and I was doing my best not to think past that. I had more important things to worry about. The tests and dinner plan with Grace came to mind. At the moment I was too tired to think. I could wait until tomorrow. Quietly trudging through the bowels of our home and ascending the stairs, I readied to take a right at the top of the incline, only to risk a glance down the other end of the corridor. The doorway was ever so slightly ajar, and I could hear the low snoring that she always denied was hers. I wanted to push the door open. I really wanted to see her, but that would have meant to overstep our already strained boundaries. So I did what I always did. Trode to the other end of the hall and passed through my empty room, my shadow gliding over the empty shelves as I prepared to touch down into the sheets. I did what I could to not leave so much as a trace throughout my already barren room. I was a visitor in my own home and didn't have the right to leave a mark on this place. Laying down against the sheets, I felt my body dissolve into the folds, flesh melting into fine grains of sand that shifted and changed with every gust of cold air. My mind continued to spiral and shiver with electricity dancing throughout my crown as I cascaded deeper and deeper into the slumbers of sleep. I don't dream very often, so whenever I did I would usually pocket the dreams in the back of my mind. Especially if they were particularly weird or if I thought they would make good conversation starters for a rainy day. This dream wasn't one I was in a hurry to remember. I was walking through an ancient forest. Trees spread out as far as the eye could see and grew upwards into the clouds, their leaves and branches threading together in a cloak of nature that shielded me from sunlight, leaving the idea of it being night or day up to the toss of a coin. The longer I prowled through the darkness, hands scraping against the rough roots of these alien plants as I tried and fought to find my way through the blackness. Crawling through the woods and making my way past the massive trunks quickly forced me to abandon all sense of direction. Was I moving in circles? Had I moved at all? Everywhere looked the same. The same blue-gray trees that stood as lone sentinels in the dark wood, holding the sky up with their roots burrowing deep beneath my feet. This place wasn't somewhere I was meant to be. It was maddening in its isolation, every turn, every step, every slight movement, and I was back to where I began. Then I heard it. A single disturbance in this unspoiled cavern of the natural world. A deafening, panting howl that reverberated throughout the trees, cascading as a fall of noise that spread from its source and shattering the silence which I had hated so, leaving me to wish it had never been broken. The cry had rooted me to the spot. A primal instinctive response that I was unable to shake. My eyes frantically whirled across the endless forest, prying apart the leaves and branches in a futile attempt to locate the source of the noise. The woods swirled as the trees pressed closer, my hands catching at every loose bit of foliage as the canopy closed down on where I stood, and I was pressed down into the dirt, my chin going down to my chest as I brought my knees up to my throat. The silence was a cacophony of shrieking, crying and laughing that made it impossible to form any coherent thought. Swallowing a being that didn't belong there. I tried to stay wakeful, lifting my weary gaze upwards before they shot open wide at the shadow that had stepped forward from the gloom to gaze down on my fading form. It was a silhouette that twisted and contorted as the edges of its body faded into the trees and blackness behind it. A thick haze that trailed along every wiry hair that stuck to its body, all along its legs and arms, leaving nothing but the pearl-white hands that were folded at its front. Standing tall and proud as it looked down upon me with a pair of eyes that burned into my skin with a boiling heat. The painful white light was blinding but oddly subdued, leaving me to wonder if their intentions were of malice or mirth. Continuing to sink ever further, its mouth peeled apart in a sick smile that was too wide, the gums exposed all the way back behind the lip as it laughed heartily to itself in a low rumbling chuckle that shook the very ground I walked upon. The strength it had taken to keep my eyes fixed on this ancient creature faltered for a last time, and I was falling back beneath the ground, waving in the darkness before I sat upright in bed screaming, the sheet sticking to my slick form as I panted and struggled to remove these saturating binds from my person, only to immediately stumble and fall forward in the darkness of my room. The image of whatever had come to me in that place, forgotten to time, long since faded from the memories of any living creature, had been seared into my eyes. Standing on shaking legs, I tried to blink it away, to push it down to someplace it wouldn't crawl back from. Only I couldn't, and in my haste to vanish those bad dreams, my delirious state left me to wander blindly forward, where I hit my head on the side of the shelf, my nose catching at an angle and with enough force to render it out of place with a solid crack. The pain was enough to bring me back to the ground I stood on. There were no trees, no roots that pulled me down, and no, whatever that thing was. I needed to calm down. Damn it, I'm a grown adult crying about nightmares. Pull yourself together, Mark. Damn it. My mind was awash with similar rumblings and condemnations, all aimed at myself and the embarrassment of suffering from a night terror at the age of 26. Legs powered by nothing but shame and the desire to satiate the throb of pain that leaked from my nose. The second time that night I'd fallen victim to my own delirious mind and poor motor function. Thanks, brain. Bringing myself down to the counter, I rested a finger along the ridge of my nose, checking its placement as I stood across from the large window that looked down over the driveway in the empty night. Flinching at the pain which sparked once more, I brought my hand back to examine my fingers and make sure there was no blood. A single motion that caused me to chance upon a shape that lay behind the sheen of glass. The near imperceptible form of a man that was only noticeable due to the slight shifting of his arm as he drew a hand along the hood of my crumpled car. I froze the second I saw him. Each part of my body screaming out in the desire to run and hoping against all hope that my eyes were simply choosing to betray reality and I was still seeing things within my haze. Blinking again, shaking my head before returning my gaze to the spot he had taken. I now knew he was staring directly at me. A toothy, fanged grin lighting across his face that stood apart from the darkness by a single shift in gradient. Fading back into the single mute color of night before I could interpret that crooked, worn face that had lingered outside of time. Vanishing as quickly as its visage had appeared to me. I had been standing in the kitchen for 10 minutes before I moved from where I stood. Unable to register that something had chosen to wander an incomprehensible distance into the mountains and untouched woodland to stand exactly outside my home. I must have dreamed something like that. My rational mind clicked into gear, trying its hardest to silence the anxious nagging that was still lingering from the morbid dream that had clawed its way into my rest. I didn't have time to worry about vague senses of doubt that had been brought on by delirium and work. I needed to focus on things that mattered. Not on hallucinations, worries, or monsters. A final thought that helped guide me back up the stairs towards my bed. A journey that was interrupted by the creaking of a door and the pattering of feet that snapped my attention immediately to Grace's door. I heard a scream. She mumbled to herself. Watching me carefully as she held half her body from behind the door, observing my face with impunity and a cautious kindness that she was weary of offering. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I shook my head with a dismissive turn, not wanting to bother her more than I already had. Is everything okay? She wondered aloud, less so to me than it was to herself. Considering if I was all right in the same way a parent would regard a troubled pet. She didn't need to ask these questions. Especially when she already knew the answers to her uninteresting husband and his normal problems. Yeah, just a bad dream, probably just work stuff. She had opened her mouth to speak only to clamp it back shut. Her face in the dark hall was a mask of uncertainty and unconvinced suspicion. Slowly she closed the door, leaving me to the chilly air within our home, nestled in the heart of that wilderness. With nothing but that image of the twisted facade slinking back into the void of nature.